Deep within the ancient ruins, weathered by 10,000 years of vicissitudes, a great bell covered in profound and mysterious patterns lay silently buried in the soil. Among those intricate patterns, faint shards of light still flowed and flickered, darting like living fish. Among the party, a single-eyed crowned Asura king sucked in a sharp breath, his voice trembling. "Fang Chen, you truly did not deceive us." Unable to contain his excitement, he cried out, "The Angel Clan's boundary artifact from 10,000 years ago, the Immortal King's indestructible bell, is truly here. Although it was severely damaged in that earth-shattering battle back then, and mercilessly corroded by the wind and frost of countless ages, it still retains the might of a boundary artifact." Another crowned Asura King's eyes blazed with fervor, his expression barely concealing his agitation. He stared intently at the colossal bell and murmured, "It is said that when the Immortal King's indestructible bell was intact, it possessed unfathomable divine abilities. It could seize the laws of human sages, the curses of the giant emperor, and even the karma of our own Asura emperor. It suppressed countless boundary artifacts across the three realms, its might unmatched in that era." He paused, his gaze turning fiery and greedy. "Now that it's damaged and fallen to a boundary artifact, I wonder if any of those defying abilities to seize still remain." The two crowned Asura kings could no longer suppress their greed. They strode forward, unable to wait, and prepared to forcibly dig out the treasure bell. But a figure suddenly stepped in front of them. It was Wang Chengxiao. He raised his arm with a faint smile, blocking their path. "Seniors, hold your hands a moment. Shouldn't we first agree on how this Immortal King's indestructible bell is to be divided?" He unhurriedly threw out the core issue. "There is only one bell. It cannot be split into three." Seeing the atmosphere grow tense, Wang Chengxiao rolled his eyes, then proposed, "How about this? The bell belongs to me, and I will compensate you both with treasures of equal value. What do you say?" Hearing this, crowned Asura King's face suddenly darkened. He glared venomously at Wang Chengxiao, a flash of murderous intent flickering in his eyes. But just as he was about to erupt, the other Asura King abruptly grabbed him and pressed down firmly. The latter used the secret sound transmission art unique to the Asura clan and whispered in his ear, "Don't act rashly. This brat dares to explore treasure with just the two of us. He must have some reliance. He is absolutely not simple. Before the Immortal King's indestructible bell is dug out, we must not make a move." He emphasized gravely, "Stabilize him first." The Asura King, who forcibly suppressed his killing intent, turned his head, and his face was already plastered with a smile. He looked at Wang Chengxiao, his tone softening a few degrees. "As you said, everyone prospers with harmony. It's not worth hurting our relationship over a dead object. This Immortal King's indestructible bell was first discovered by fellow Taoist Fang, so you naturally have the right of first claim. We are not unreasonable people." He shifted the conversation, his gaze burning. "Only, what do you intend to use to compensate us?" Wang Chengxiao smiled calmly, without the slightest hesitation. He directly took out two naturally formed spatial storage devices and casually tossed them, one to each of them. The two Asura Kings caught them with surprise, then lowered their heads to scrutinize carefully. In an instant, their pupils simultaneously contracted sharply, their faces drastically changing color. Unable to maintain their composure, they screamed in shock. This is Aeon soil. So much Aeon soil. Our dark Asura clan has ceaselessly scoured the entire southern heavenly realm for 10,000 years, but even our 10,000-year accumulation falls far short of what you've just brought out." One Asura King suddenly realized, blurting out, "You didn't discover the ancient Angel Clan's imperial court ruins and move the entire back garden's Aeon soil here, did you?" The two crowned Asura Kings had utterly lost their earlier calm, their expressions held only wild excitement and greed. Wang Chengxiao, however, only smiled without a word, folding his arms and lazily asking, "Just tell me, are you satisfied with this compensation or not?" The two crowned Asura Kings exchanged a lightning, fast glance, then without the slightest hesitation, nodded emphatically in unison, "No problem." At this moment, receiving such a huge amount of Aeon soil alone would already leave them utterly content. Of course, if they could also take the Immortal King's indestructible bell along in the end, that would naturally be even better. Wang Chengxiao, seeing this, immediately smiled. "Then I'll trouble you two seniors to thoroughly dig out this bell." He pointed at the colossal bell and said gravely, "Inside this bell, there still remains an extremely domineering power of law. I cannot touch it lightly. This matter now entirely depends on you two." The two crowned Asura Kings showed an expression of complete understanding. If it weren't so troublesome, Wang Chengxiao wouldn't have handed them such a bargain. Thus, without any hesitation, each carefully retrieved from his bosom a sliver of karma personally bestowed by the Dark Asura Emperor. This object was comparable to the supreme laws of the Central Earth human race, truly possessing boundless might. Their expressions turned solemn, and they shouted in unison, "Karma, manifest." The instant they activated it, two vast torrents of Asura power surged forth, transforming into two invisible giant hands that firmly gripped the immortal king's indestructible bell. Then the two exerted their divine strength and fiercely heaved upward. A thunderous boom echoed, as if the entire underground trembled. The immortal king's indestructible bell was finally pulled alive from the earth that had slumbered for eons. Instantly, a desolate and distant chime resounded, transforming into rolling sound waves that swept in all directions. Wave after wave of nearly tangible, terrifying power of law assaulted the 2-5, crowned Asura king's head on. The power of karma on their bodies burned furiously, emitting sizzling sounds as they struggled to resist the law's invasion. Not far away, Wang Chengxi had long since taken out a shield radiating holy light, holding it steadily in front of him, completely neutralizing the surging residual fluctuations of law. When the last echoes of the bell ceased, the terrifying laws lingering in the surroundings slowly dispersed. The immortal king's indestructible bell had successfully emerged into the world. However, this also meant that the struggle over who this treasured bell truly belonged to was about to begin. As expected, the 2-5, crowned Asura kings casually exchanged a glance out of the corners of their eyes, and deep within each other's pupils, a trace of cruel ruthlessness simultaneously flashed. Without any communication, the dark bloodline within them erupted simultaneously. Countless karma threads glowing with eerie light shot out like vipers leaving their den, blanketing the sky as they shot toward Wang Qingxiao, determined to instantly control him into a living marionette. They had no intention of killing Wang Qingxiao immediately, because the other party clearly still had many good things on him. But who would have known that at the exact instant the two explosively struck, Wang Qingxiao also moved. In his hand, at some unknown time, had appeared a snow-white, broken jade rod. He raised it and lightly pointed through the air at the two. In that moment, the word that left his mouth seemed to become the supreme principle of heaven and earth, carrying an undeniable authority. Halt. A bizarre and unparalleled scene unfolded. Those 2-5, crowned Asura kings of profound cultivation, were truly frozen stiff on the spot. Not only were their bodies immobile, but even the thoughts in their minds were simultaneously coagulated by that eerie power, turning them into two senseless, unaware living dead. Wang Chengxi casually waved the jade rod in his hand and sneered, "Two fools. Did you think I, Wang Chengxiao, am some brainless idiot who would collaborate with tigers? Since I dared to call you here, I had long since ceased to fear you turning against me." He swaggered up to the two and unhurriedly retrieved the two spatial storage devices brimming with a huge amount of Eon soil, his mouth still mocking, "Tusk, this is the precious Eon soil I risked my life to obtain. Did you truly think pie would fall from the sky and benefit you too? If I took these items to the northern heavenly realm to auction, even those two lofty 9-winged great angels would probably be unable to sit still." Having stowed the storage devices, Wang Chengxiao turned his head and gazed with burning passion at the immortal king's indestructible bell, which was close at hand. His face flushed with excitement as he muttered to himself in ecstasy, "That map I painstakingly found in the underground palace truly didn't deceive me. The immortal king's indestructible bell truly sank in this vicinity." Wang Chengxiao clapped his hands excitedly, as delighted as a child. Good heavens, this is one of the celestial realm's mightiest boundary artifacts. He stepped forward, caressing the cold bell body with affectionate reluctance, and declared with immense satisfaction, "Now it's mine." With this bell in hand, who in the vast southern celestial realm would I, Wang Chengxiao, fear? At his most triumphant, he couldn't help but laugh aloud. "He he he, come to think of it, I should really thank that unlucky fool Fang Chen. If not for him, how could I, Wang Qingxiao, have picked up so many heaven-sent treasures in the southern celestial realm?" Then, as if struck by an amusing thought, he burst into laughter toward the sky. If he were to find out about all this, would he get so furious he'd spit blood by the gallon? Ha ha ha. Just as he was laughing heartily, utterly lost in his glory, a muffled thump abruptly sounded without any warning whatsoever. Wang Chengxi felt a sharp pain at the back of his head, and a familiar yet damnably long mist sensation instantly coursed through his entire body. Stung by pain, he stumbled forward a few steps, but his reaction was extremely fast. He quickly steadied his mind, and after regaining his footing, he laughed in extreme fury. "Fang Chen, it's you again, you bastard." Those words were almost ground out through clenched teeth, yet tinged with a habitual helplessness. Clearly, he had long grown accustomed to how, after every time he schemed against others, Fang Chen would, like a lingering curse, play the mantis stalking the cicada, turning the tables on him. But then, a smirk of a successful scheme appeared on Wang Qingxiao's face. But what you don't realize is that I painstakingly cultivated an iron head technique, precisely to guard against despicable sneak attacks like yours. His words had yet to fade when that death knell-like sound rang out densely once more. Thump, 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 immediately followed by a storm, like barrage of relentless blows, unending to the ears. Thump, 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 thump. A ripping, unbearable agony instantly erupted across Wang Qingxiao's head. Not even giving him a moment to savor it, his vision went black, his body went limp, and with a thud, he collapsed to the ground. White foam bubbled from his mouth, his limbs twitching spasmodically as if seized by convulsions. An utterly wretched sight. In the air behind him, a transparent ripple stirred quietly. Fang Chen leisurely deactivated the selfless, purifying dust art and materialized out of thin air. He carried a club over his shoulder, shrugged, and said with an utterly innocent expression, "Sorry, Brother Wang, but my club happened to have leveled up too." Fang Chen stepped over to the immortal monarch's indestructible bell, his eyes filled with joy he could hardly conceal. If he had heard correctly earlier, this bell, at its peak, could actually siphon the power of others' laws. This ability, if it were truly so, wouldn't that mean the heaven, defying effect of his primordial heavens? Imprisoning Gourd would no longer have any restrictions, and could be unleashed without restraint. To avoid any unforeseen complications, Fang Chen forcefully suppressed his stirring heart. Not daring to examine it too closely, he raised his hand and stored the immortal monarch's indestructible bell into his spatial storage artifact. Immediately after, he bent down and picked up from the ground the snowy white shield and jade-like staff that Wang Qingxiao had dropped. His gaze, too, burned with fervor. He had seen it clearly with his own eyes. Wang Qingxiao had used that very shield to bluntly block the aftermath of the law's power, emerging completely unscathed. A fine treasure, not taking it would be a waste, stored. As for that jade staff, it was even more heaven, defying. It had actually immobilized 2 dignified 5 Crown Asura kings on the spot, and they still hadn't broken free even now. A supreme treasure, it must be taken. Swiftly stowing away those 2 supreme artifacts, Fang Chen then thoroughly searched Wang Qingxiao's body, quickly finding the 2 spatial storage devices that held the profound oil and decisively tucked them into his own purse as well. His gaze traveled downward, and he grabbed Wang Qingxi by the collar. Tusk, this robe's material is quite nice. Is it a superior, Raid Spirit artifact? Damn, it's even better than what I'm wearing. Absolutely outrageous. Strip it. I must strip it off. In 2 or 3 swift moves, Fang Chen unceremoniously stuffed it into his collection. Then his eyes lit up again. These trousers gleam with spiritual light. They definitely have something special about them. Strip them too, leave nothing behind. Like an autumn gale sweeping away fallen leaves, Fang Chen rolled up all the outer and inner trousers, his gaze finally resting on the last remaining undergarment. For a moment, he hesitated. Forget it. We're brothers after all. Leave a thread of mercy, so future encounters aren't too awkward. Let him keep this one. Fang Chen deeply understood the principle of quitting while ahead. As for the 2 5 Crown Asura kings still frozen on the spot, Fang Chen wasn't foolish enough to wait for them to break free and seek revenge on their own. He raised his club and without mercy, thump, 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 delivered 80, 1 solid strikes to each, beating them until they foamed at the mouth and fainted completely to the ground. Only then did he contentedly stop. Afterward, he hauled out his life-bound magic treasure, Tiankin, and from her carefully separated a bit of the glowing immortal binding vine, then tied the 2 of them tightly like Zongzi. Tiankin blinked her clear, limpid eyes and stared blankly at those 2 unlucky fellow 5 Crown Asura kings, her face showing disbelief. Has that little devil messed with my mind into hallucinating? She shook her head vigorously and said, uncertain and shocked, I seem to be seeing 2 elders who are far away in the celestial realm. That can't be possible. Fang Chen, standing nearby, merely nodded with a calm, unconcerned air and grinned at her. Yeah, I figured you'd be lonely staying in the celestial realm all by yourself, so I made a special trip up to find you some compatriots to keep you company. Upon hearing this, Tiankin's divine sense instantly swept the surroundings. Feeling the celestial realm's spiritual energy so dense it hardly seemed capable of dissolving, She was so shocked her mouth gaped. Why, you actually came to the celestial realm. Fang Chen waved it off, urging, we'll head back down right away. All right, the matter's settled. Quickly go back inside. As he spoke, he waved his hand and threw the 3 unconscious figures into the spatial mirror. Having done all this, he gave one last glance at Wang Qingxiao, who lay sprawled on the ground in nothing but his underwear, smiled faintly, and with a graceful cupped hand salute, said, Brother Wang, the mountains remain green, the waters ever flow, until we meet again. Not long after, Fang Chen reunited with the main group. The Red Demon Venerable scrutinized him from head to toe, and upon seeing the smile he couldn't hide in his brows, his expression turned peculiar, judging by that radiant, beaming look of yours. Your gains this time must be quite substantial. Fang Chen forcefully held back his laughter, repeatedly waving his hand in denial. Not at all, just happened to meet an old friend and caught up a bit, purely reminiscing. Beside him, Yu Mingju had already been unable to suppress her mirth. She gave a light laugh, stretched out her jade-like finger, and gently pressed it against the corner of Fang Chen's mouth, which was threatening to split all the way to his ears. Yet the moment she released her hand, that upturned lip disobediently sprang back up. Seeing this, Yu Mingju covered her mouth and smiled. Look at you. Just how many treasures did you get that your grin can't even be pressed down? Fang Chen coughed dryly, used his sleeve to hide his face, and urged in a low voice, It's nothing, let's head down quickly. The sky-piercing black pillar can't hold on for much longer. Under his urging, the white tiger let out a deep roar, and once again broke into a run with massive paws. Yu Mingju chuckled, turned her head to gaze in the direction of the great rift, and a flash of 9-colored light flickered in her eyes for an instant. As if glimpsing a terrifying sight, she couldn't help but exclaim in shock, this isn't the same person. His luck has multiplied several times over. The last time she had peered into Wang Qingxiao's fortune, it was already vast enough to rival the entire take, in great state. Looking again now, that fortune had at least increased 4- or 5-fold, as mighty as 4 or 5 taking great states combined. It might even be no less than the entire heavenly state. Yu Mingju was inwardly stunned, secretly speculating, just what is this guy's background? She had never seen any living being possess such terrifying fortune, not even the sages or giant kings could reach such a level. Shocked as she was, seeing that Wang Qingxiao was about to completely vanish from sight, Yu Mingju's beautiful eyes turned crafty, and she laughed softly. Fang Chen has been our king so hard lately, he deserves some replenishment. Then she secretly cast a spell and ruthlessly sliced off a chunk of Wang Qingxiao's fortune. A mountain-like heap of immense fortune was cleanly cut away and instantly transferred into Fang Chen's body. Fang Chen, who was taking inventory of treasures, suddenly felt an indescribable sense of comfort and clarity wash over him, as if he had just enjoyed the ultimate massage. He couldn't help but grin, muttering to himself, sure enough, a joyful event lifts one's spirits. After saying that, he set up an isolating barrier around him, then quietly inspected the 2 spatial storage devices. He had thought that since he already possessed Zerang, these 2 storage devices could no longer move him. But who knew, once he scanned the Zerang inside, he was so shocked his jaw nearly dropped. His own Zerang was only the size of a fist, barely enough to accommodate the divine tree, stasis seed, and immortal, binding vine, already stretched to its limit. But the Zerang within these 2 spatial storage devices combined was a full mu of land. Fang Chen was stunned for a good while, thinking, just how many things could be planted here? I'm afraid that even if all the top-tier treasures of heaven, Middle-earth, and the Hell Realm were combined, they still might not fill it. He secretly calculated with excitement. It seems I'll have to focus on collecting seeds from now on. I can use what I grow myself, and sell what I can't use to Kiki at a high price. Moreover, Zerang can be used infinitely, which means I essentially possess a gold mine that produces gold endlessly. After merging both portions of Zerang into one, Fang Chen carefully stowed it away in a spatial storage device. Then he examined the jade rod he had obtained. This object was utterly heaven-defying. Wang Qingxiao, who was merely at the first decline of a heavenly being, had actually used it to directly immobilize 2 heavenly beings at the 5th decline. If I had this magic treasure in hand, the confrontations at the deity transformation level during the Great War in Middle-earth would be much easier. Upon closer inspection, he discovered that it was engraved with the script of the angel race. Fortunately, in the stone cone of the Myriad Tribulation's sacred hall, that white-robed skeleton had forced him to learn the angel race script, so now he could read it without any obstacle. Immobilizing immortal jade branch, Fang Chen murmured, and after careful observation, he found that it was indeed a section of a branch from some ancient tree. Within it, someone had infused the law of temporal stasis. Thus, when activated, it would freeze a person, thoughts and all. However, the temporal stasis law within had been used up by Wang Chengxi, to the point that very little remained. It could perhaps still immobilize 2 more heavenly beings at the 5th decline. Fang Chen couldn't help but feel a pang of heartache, and said indignantly, "Wang Chengxiao, how could you squander my things like this? Just because it's not yours, you don't treasure it, right?" Once the temporal stasis law inside was completely exhausted, Fang Chen would have no other place to replenish it. He carefully put away the jade rod and then turned his gaze to that shield. This shield, on the other hand, was very well preserved. In the future, even if he encountered battles at the sage level, he wouldn't be unable to withstand even a single ripple of their power. Finally, there was the immortal king's indestructible bell. The bell's body was covered with cracks, extremely damaged, yet even so, it still possessed the rank of a quasi-realm artifact. If an ordinary magic tool were shattered to this extent, it would have most likely become worthless scrap metal long ago. Clearly, when intact, it was definitely an immensely powerful realm artifact. Seeing that there was still a lot of sand and soil on it, Fang Chen used his deity transformation power to clean it. However, when the deity transformation power was cleaning the inside of the bell, as he cleaned, a lump of black substance fell out. At first, he thought it was just black sand. Upon closer inspection, he realized it was actually a severed palm. After washing away the black impurities on the surface, a beautiful palm of jade, like smoothness with long, slender fingers, was revealed, looking like a woman's hand. Even more astonishing was that the palm was lifelike, as if it had just been severed recently. It didn't look at all like something that had been buried under sand for 10,000 years. Fang Chen's heart shook violently. He had seen the remains of the Calamity Sage. Although they were also intact, 1,000 years had made them look gray and dim, clearly recognizable as a corpse. But this severed hand before him gave off an intensely lively feeling. He no longer dared to guess what level of expert this hand belonged to. He even cautiously stepped back. He took out a random high-grade spirit tool and carefully prodded the severed hand. After confirming it posed no threat, he dared to slowly extend his finger and touch it bit by bit. Finally, after confirming there was absolutely no problem, he picked it up. The fingers of that palm were in a tightly clenched state, yet unable to fully close, as if gripping something in its palm. Fang Chen's heart raced. How could the object that such an existence would still grip tightly before death be ordinary? He tried to pry open the fingers, but those 5 fingers seemed to have fused with the palm and couldn't be pried open no matter what. He also considered whether to use his flawless domain or directly destroy the hand. But as soon as this thought arose, he immediately extinguished it. For a severed hand of an unknown existence, it was better not to act rashly, lest he fail to obtain anything and also trigger unpredictable risk. Thinking of this, he took out a separate spatial storage device, intending to put the severed hand inside. Who would have thought? The moment the severed hand was placed inside, that spatial storage device immediately burst apart. The severed hand then dropped out from the void, landing right on Fang Chen's leg. Fang Chen instantly broke out in a cold sweat. This spatial storage device couldn't even bear this severed hand. He tried twice more consecutively, and the result was the same without exception. The spatial storage devices all burst under the pressure. This, whose hand is this exactly? Fang Chen was completely numb. He had originally thought the Immortal King's indestructible bell was the greatest gain of this trip, but he never expected this severed hand to be it. Since the spatial storage device couldn't contain it, he had no choice but to carry it on his person, carefully placing it into his sleeve. He planned to wait until Kiki came and asked her if she had a magic treasure specifically used for prying things open. The heaven-reaching black pillar is here, Yu Mingju spoke up to remind him. She had long since put away her smile, and the flames of fury were rekindled in her eyes. Fang Chen also withdrew the barrier, stood up, looked at the heaven-reaching black pillar before him, and shouted loudly, "Let's go, give them a surprise." It is said that not long after Fang Chen's group departed, in that great fissure, Wang Chengxi held his head and slowly woke up. He muttered in confusion, "Where am I? Right, I was searching for the Immortal King's indestructible bell, and I actually got it." He excitedly sat up, but what he saw was an empty scene. At that moment, memories flooded back like a tide. His expression gradually darkened, and he gritted his teeth and roared, "Fang Chen, it's F** seeking you again. This is the heavenly realm, not Middle Earth." How can I still run into you? As he was roaring, a cold wind blew, and he suddenly felt chilly all over. He looked down and immediately exploded with rage, cursing, "You only left me a pair of underpants. You might as well have taken everything. You left me underpants. Do you expect me to thank you?" Under the assault of fury, his vision went black, and he vomited a mouthful of blood on the spot. All his hard work and struggle in the heavenly realm had ultimately been completely hijacked by Fang Chen. After a long while, he calmed down a little, clenching his fists until they cracked, and swore in his heart, "I won't be a man if I don't avenge this. After I find a few more deadly weapons in the heavenly realm, I'll go back to Middle-earth to settle the score with you." Suddenly, the ground beneath him shook violently. It was as if something was tearing apart the spatial barrier of the heavenly realm, trying to force its way in from here. Wang Chengxi hurriedly cast a mysterious spell he had just obtained, and his entire body immediately merged with the surrounding stone wall, leaving only his two eyes rolling arrows. And to monitor from the outside, a thunderous cracking sound exploded, and abruptly, a terrifying void rift appeared below. Everything in the canyon was instantly and mercilessly swallowed by that force. Even the colossal canyon walls on both sides began to crumble, on the verge of falling into that void. Wang Chengxi was utterly horrified. Fortunately, after a group of golden giant emperors returned with hordes of giant remnant troops, they worked together to close that void rift. Leading them was the 6 Sun Giant Emperor, followed in order by 3 Sun Giant Emperors and the 10 Sinners of Middle-earth. At this moment, the slumbering Giant Emperor was in a very bad state. His originally massive body was so emaciated that he was skin and bones, and most of his flesh and blood had mysteriously disappeared. The cursed sun wheel on his forehead had even dimmed as a result, looking like it was about to go out. With a thud, the slumbering giant emperor collapsed weakly to the ground and asked with lingering fear, "My emperor, what was that thing? How can there be such a dreadful existence outside the spatial barrier of Middle-earth?" The expressions of the giant emperors and the 10 sinners of Middle-earth changed drastically, and the giant kings they had rescued at the cost of their lives instantly turned ashen. Originally, this rescue operation had been quite orderly. Over 100 giant kings had been mostly retrieved, and 2,000 to 3,000 ancient giant warriors had been gathered. Although the casualties were still shocking, at least a precious spark had been preserved for the heavenly realm. Who would have thought that a sudden change would occur? A supremely eerie lotus root suddenly tore through the void without warning. Its slender stem swelled in the wind, as if infinitely extendable, and with a single sweep through the air, it entangled a large group of giants. Immediately after, a cringe-inducing sucking sound was heard. In the blink of an eye, those giants were sucked dry of flesh and blood, turning into shriveled husks. The slumbering giant emperor struck fiercely, but unexpectedly, the lotus stem recoiled like lightning, wrapping tightly around him and madly draining his flesh and blood. Had the 6-day giant emperor not rushed back in time and driven it away with a thunderous strike, he too would have become a pile of bones. Even so, the remnants of their painstakingly gathered army were still devoured on the spot by that terrifying lotus, over half of them. In the end, only a mere 20 odd giant kings and over 1,000 primordial giants managed to escape with their lives. The 6-day giant emperor's face was so dark it could drip water. That is the calamity, transcending Black Lotus, an ancient being that has existed since the very creation of the Hell Realm. The slumbering giant emperor clutched his caved-in chest and rasped, no wonder, so terrifyingly powerful. The 6-day giant emperor gritted his teeth, his voice sinking into the abyss, and this is only a seedling. If a mature form were to descend, even I would become its nourishment. At these words, a chorus of sharp intakes of breath filled the air around them. If a mere seedling was this fearsome, what kind of world-destroying existence would a mature form be? Fear still lingering, the slumbering giant emperor's anger surged. This calamity, transcending Black Lotus, must be a vicious plot of the Central Land people. They deliberately sank Hunyuan and left a Black Lotus to guard the void, clearly intent on exterminating us, refugees of the heavenly realm. How venomous those humans are. The 6-day giant emperor looked up at the shattered sky, eyes burning with fury that could incinerate the heavens. Half the blame for this defeat rests on me, and the other half entirely on that human, Fang Chen. If we don't kill him, the countless fallen clansmen of our heavenly realm will never rest in peace. He turned sharply, murderous aura spilling everywhere. Send word to the Dark Age. Sura clan immediately form a death squad. Before the sky-connecting black column completely dissipates, infiltrate the Central Land and bring me Fang Chen's head. The giants present heard this and erupted with bone-chilling killing intent. They firmly believed that without Fang Chen, the Central Land would never have won. Just then, a giant king hesitantly spoke. "Emperor, is that man called Fang Chen or Wang Qingxiao? He entered our heavenly realm twice, both times under the name Wang Qingxiao. Yet within our realm, another human frequently impersonates Fang Chen and wreaks havoc. Which of these two is the real Fang Chen, and which is the real Wang Qingxiao?" The six-day giant emperor's gaze was icy, his tone brooking no argument. "Can't tell the difference." "Then there's no need to tell. Kill them both." Far away, Wang Qingxiao, who was hiding in the shadows, felt a sharp pang in his chest, a mouthful of blood rushing to his throat, but stubbornly refused to come out. He was utterly indignant. "Why can't you just distinguish between us? Fang Chen is Fang Chen, Wang Qingxiao is Wang Qingxiao. Don't these giants understand that debts have their specific debtors?" What chilled him even more was that the six-day giant emperor had directly named him. From this moment on, he would face the entire heavenly realm's relentless pursuit. Several factions within the Dark Asura clan knew his background. If they took this assassination order, he absolutely could not stay in the heavenly realm any longer. Hoping to remain in the heavenly realm to seek treasures and opportunities was likely impossible now. Wang Qingxiao's chest heaved violently. He gritted his teeth and shouted inwardly, "Fang Chen, oh Fang Chen, you stole my treasures and now you've smashed my livelihood, just you wait." Meanwhile, in the central land, returning Void Prefecture, the foremost of the 7 cities of the heavenly, abyssal, astral pivot city, Zhu Qianzhang stood with his hands behind his back, a look of supreme arrogance as he surveyed the chaotic battlefield below. Half-giant warriors were locked in fierce combat with a human coalition led by the Star Cluster Mountain. How was the battle? Naturally, it was a completely one-sided slaughter. This was because the earlier great battle had seen the full force of the primordial giants' offensive fall upon the humans of the western continent. The main force of Star Cluster Mountain had won a big victory, but their vitality was severely damaged and casualties were heavy. In contrast, the primordial giants had practically brushed past Heavenly Remnant City on the eastern continent. Moreover, that city had merely watched the battle from the sidelines, not losing a single soldier. With one side waning and the other waxing, how could the current strength disparity be anything but despairingly vast? Watching the humans retreating in defeat, flesh and blood flying, Zhu Qianzhang's lips slowly curled into an exultant smirk. From now on, this returning Void Prefecture will be the domain of us half-giants. You humans either kneel obediently as our slaves or die. As he spoke, a trusted giant aide flew over with a beaming smile, reporting to General Zhu, "Under my command, we have destroyed all privately constructed teleportation arrays. For a short time, no other prefecture will be able to send a single soldier to reinforce this place." Zhu Qianzhang gave a slight nod, a deep look of admiration flashing in his eyes. The sage is truly far-sighted. Right after the giants were defeated, he sent a secret urgent message ordering us to destroy all official and private teleportation arrays to prevent a human counterattack. He said, his smile growing more vicious. "When the sage returns, we shall proclaim to the world that, following the example of that continent, we will seal our borders entirely and forbid any outsider from entering. Any who dare trespass will be killed without mercy. From then on, our half-giant race will have eternal security." The trusted giant turned to look at the sky-connecting black column piercing the clouds and sighed deeply, his face full of regret. In truth, the best fate would be for our entire race to migrate to the heavenly realm. That is the homeland our half-giants yearn for in their dreams. But those central land humans got dog shit luck, turning the tide in the war, and the sky-connecting black column will soon collapse. We are already too late? At the speed of an ordinary nascent soul cultivator, it would take at least 5 full days to pass through the sky-connecting black column and reach the heavenly realm. And clearly the column would not last until then. Thus, they had no choice but to settle for second-best complete independence for returning Void Prefecture. Zhu Qianzhang also raised his head, gazing at the towering black column, his eyes filled with unwillingness and regret. "We half-giants are like abandoned children who have wandered outside for 1,000 years. This time we had a chance to rush into the embrace of our ancestors, but unfortunately, their fortune was poor, and they could not defeat those lowly humans." His tone then suddenly surged with passion. "However, we have already gained the recognition of our ancestors. During this great war, we did everything to assist their main force onto the battlefield. With such a monumental achievement, our ancestors will never forget us. We just need to endure until the next millennium, and they will surely come to the central land in person, and guide us back to the heavenly realm. Then our half-giant race will truly and completely be freed." The trusted giant heard this and fully agreed. These words were not just Zhu Kainzheng's personal delusion, but a collective dream branded into the blood of all half-giants. They had never seen themselves as prey like the humans of the Central Land. Instead, they believed they were born to be hunters alongside the primordial giants. The heavenly realm was their only homeland. They were merely temporarily unlucky, stranded on this filthy central continent. Roar, roar. Just then, a deafening, mountain-shaking cheer erupted from the front lines. Zhu Kainzheng looked up at the sound, seeing that the humans' last defensive line had been completely overrun, the surviving cultivators discarding their armor and fleeing in utter rout. The half-giant warriors were ecstatic, chasing them down like wild beasts in a hunt. With savage grins, they swung their massive clubs, each strike reducing flesh to a pulp. The humans were instantly trapped in a hellish massacre of bloodshed and casualties. A cruel smile appeared on Zhu Kainzheng's face. He waved his hand to issue an order. "Pass the word. Kill all the men, keep all the women. Especially our returning void prefectures, number 1 beauty, purple myrtle fairy. Be careful, don't damage that pretty face of hers." The trusted giant immediately understood and let out a vile, lecherous laugh. "Yes, I'll go fetch purple myrtle fairy at once, so General Zhu can enjoy her first." Before his words faded, he leaped forward, diving into the hellish battlefield like a greedy vulture. Zhu Kainzheng curled a corner of his mouth, his eyes full of cat, playing, with mouse amusement as he leisurely watched the screaming humans below. At this peak moment of supreme satisfaction, the sky-connecting black column beside him violently shuddered without the slightest warning. Zhu Kainzheng looked up in shock, seeing chaotic gales surging at the column's top, as if some colossal entity was tearing through the void, descending from the heavenly realm to the mortal world. His breathing suddenly quickened, his entire body quivering with fervent agitation. Could it be that the ancestors are descending at this final moment? Do they have some last testament to deliver, or are they coming to take us away directly? Under his scorching, near-maniacal gaze, a colossal, blindingly white mass, as immense as a mountain, tore through the astral wind clouds with a deafening roar and slammed heavily onto the earth. That was unmistakably a white tiger, 20 zhang tall, radiating the terrifying aura of the 5 declines of heaven and man. On its back stood grimly a host of figures, both human and asura. And the one leading them was, astonishingly, a youth. He stood alone atop the tiger's head, robes billowing, his gaze descending with absolute frost. "I'm sorry, but it is not your ancestors who have come down." The youth paused, a Athgod smile curling at his lips. "However, I can be merciful and send you scum to meet your damned ancestors in the underworld." Fang Chen looked down, murderous intent churning in his chest. These cursed half-giants, still foolishly dreaming of holding out until the next millennium for their ancestors to retrieve them. Zhu Kainzheng's pupils abruptly shrank to pinpoints, and he cried out in horror. "Fang Chen, you're that butcher who slaughtered more than half of our Dharma manifestation cultivators in Tianyi City. Who, in the world now, does not know the name Fang Chen?" But Zhu Kainzheng's mind was a chaotic mess. Dazed and stupefied, he gazed at the heavens. How did you descend from the celestial realm?" With a mere thought, Fang Chen's figure flickered and instantly teleported before him. He unhurriedly raised his hand and slowly drew the purple lightning divine sword. The blade, smooth as flowing water, clearly reflected his face, sinking inch by inch into icy depths. "You sealed all the prefecture-level teleportation arrays. To return, we naturally had to route through the celestial realm and traverse the void." Zhu Kainzheng felt as though an invisible giant hand had seized his heart, his entire body turning ice cold. Indeed, they came with ill intent. He retreated in panic, swallowing hard, and with a last desperate shred of hope, stiffly cupped his fists. "Venerable Starfire, I wonder what brings you and the other venerables," he from afar, any instructions. Even as he spoke, he had discreetly activated an emergency transmission artifact hidden in his robes. The moment the artifact's fluctuations emerged, Fang Chen's sword sliced them apart with a single blow. Fang Chen stared at him coldly and said in a deep voice, "No need to notify Sage Sixen. Whether he comes or not, you all will die." The sound of tearing wind from billowing robes swiftly swept past. Yu Mingzhu, Venerable Zhenyan, and the others all flashed into existence beside Fang Chen. Apart from Yu Mingzhu and Lin Zhenyu, everyone else possessed cultivation at the spirit transformation level, radiating an invincible aura that crushed all beneath it. The sharp killing intent emanating from them was utterly undisguised. Zhu Kainzheng's heart was a tangled mess. Blustering to hide his cowardice, he shouted, "Venerable Starfire, watch your words and conduct." killing us half, giants, and uttering such treasonous words, don't you ever consider the consequences? A cold gleam of sword light flashed abruptly as Fang Chen's purple lightning sword rested directly against his neck. Fang Chen's gaze was cold and resolute. I will not only kill you present here, but also wipe out every half giant in Tianyi City, so that upon the soil of the Central Plains, ye shall never again be a single half giant. Zhu Qianzhang immediately screamed in panicked hysteria. Fang Chen, are you mad? We too are living beings of the Central Plains. To slaughter us, have you consulted the sages? Have you consulted the ancient saints? Fang Chen said flatly, and when you devoured the 7 cities of Tianyuan, aiding the giant king's main force in vowing to exterminate the human race of the Western continent, did you ever consult the sages? Did you consult the ancient saints? You bunch of half giants, there's no need for further pretense. A malignant tumor like you, the Central Plains can no longer tolerate you. Before his words had even faded, he raised the purple lightning sword high. Zhu Qianzhang was finally completely gripped by terror. He begged piteously, don't kill me, venerable Starfire. I was only following orders. My heart is still loyal to the Central Plains. Please grant me a chance to reform. I will definitely. He desperately tried to buy time, hoping only that Sage Sixin would return quickly. However, in the next moment, his neck suddenly went cold, and then his enormous head tumbled to the ground with a roll. His eyes gradually widened, frozen with immense shock and unwillingness. A sharp whistling sound rang out, and a partially gray, translucent soul flew out from within. Zhu Qianzhang's soul was terrified beyond measure, and immediately tried to flee into the void in a desperate escape. Before the many venerables, he didn't dare utter a single harsh word. But just as he slipped into the void, a string of Buddhist prayer beads, swirling with golden light, whistled over and tightly entangled the soul. Fang Chen expressionlessly took out the fate-altering jade butterfly and amid the soul's pitiful shrieks forcibly slammed it into one of the holes. A faint crimson light then glowed dimly. That half of a human soul within their bodies was enough to light up a single hole. Fang Chen put away the fate-altering jade butterfly and turned his head to shout, everyone, when killing them, be sure to capture all their souls. I have a great use for them. Venerable Xin Mo could no longer hold back and let out a long howl. Then let's first slaughter all the half giants present. The rest all instantly teleported into the battlefield, slaughtering as they went. Fang Chen reached out and grasped Yu Mingzhu's hand, saying in a deep voice, come, let us avenge wanking Yellow. Yu Mutin produced a bundle of jet-black, gleaming threads. It was unmistakably a top-grade spirit artifact of unfathomable power. She gritted her teeth and said, this top-grade spirit artifact was personally commissioned by my master in Divine Weapon Prefecture. I have never used it before. Today, let these half-giants be its first blood. With a single thought, Fang Chen brought Yu Mingzhu directly to the very heart of the battlefield. In a corner of the battlefield, a young woman in a vivid red dress and a mask over her face was wielding a long sword, desperately resisting the frenzied assault of several golden body stage half-giants. Although she had broken through to the 7 orifices nascent soul stage, the half-giants besieging her had all reached the 8 orifices level. Under the combined siege of 4 opponents, she was soon gravely injured and vomiting blood. The trusted henchman leading them grinned viciously as he closed in. He, General Zhu has ordered that the Zue ferry must be captured alive. His colossal palm, over 3 meters wide, came pressing down on her with an oppressive darkness. The Zue ferry's eyes held no ripple of emotion. She had long been prepared for this ultimate sacrifice. With a flick of her sleeve, she instantly activated an explosive rune of terrifying power. She intended not only to blast the surrounding half-giants to death, but also to destroy herself along with them. She would rather die than fall into the hands of these filthy half-giants. However, just as the rune was about to detonate, several of the golden body half-giants surrounding her suddenly bore ominous bloodlines on their bodies without any warning. Those bloodlines were high on the chest for some, and low on the neck for others. It was as if something extremely sharp had simultaneously sliced through their bodies. Immediately after, their bodies split into 2 halves, crashing onto the ground in a shower of gore. Those whose heads were severed died instantly. Those severed at the chest writhed in agony on the ground, their upper bodies letting out the most harrowing wails. Filthy blood and entrails of every color sprayed out, drenching the Zue ferry from head to toe. She abruptly looked up and just happened to see a man and a woman flying overhead hand in hand. The girl was beautiful, holding the jet, black, gleaming threads in her hand. The youth was handsome and slender, tightly holding the girl's hand and silently channeling spirit transformation power into her, allowing the thread's immense might to be fully unleashed. The Ziwei fairy was completely stunned. It was Fang Chen, and Yu Mingzhu. At that moment, Fang Chen happened to glance her way, but covered in filth and viscera, her original appearance was completely unrecognizable. Fang Chen withdrew his gaze and continued flying forward with Yu Mingzhu. The Ziwei fairy fell silent, a swirl of indescribable emotion welling in her eyes. Even Yu Mingzhu had gotten together with Fang Chen. She smiled bitterly, her heart aching, yet also feeling a strange sense of comfort. Fang Chen hadn't recognized her. That was good. She shakily climbed to her feet, clutching her wounded chest, and turned to gaze at the two figures who were rampaging through the battlefield. After a long while, she hobbled away into the distance, slowly disappearing into a deserted corner. Fang Chen remained completely unaware of all this. Holding Yu Mingzhu's hand, he moved through the battlefield, helping her slay one half, giant after another. There were over 2,000 Golden Body Realm half, giants within this heavenly relic city, more than the total number in the entire taking great state. Fang Chen's heart churned with hatred. The central plains actually raised so many ungrateful wolves. Remembering the despair when taking great state faced the Black Sun royal court of the continent, countless 8 aperture and 9 aperture experts threw themselves into the fire, like moths, just to fight for a sliver of hope. Now look at these beasts slaughtering their own kind. This hatred in my heart has already surpassed that I felt for the ancient giants. He bellowed, flawless domain. A terrifying domain force swept forth. All injured half, giants under this force, exploded on the spot into puffs of blood mist. A fallen and wounded half, giant screamed in terror. Starfire exulted, don't misunderstand, we are all on the same side. Fang Chen said with disgust, who is on the same side as you? With a pachai sound, the sword rose and a head fell, sinful blood scattering in the air. Another half, giant howled, Fang Chen, if we've done anything wrong, the compassionate sage will punish us himself. It's not your place. Another pachai sound, and another head shot up into the sky. Someone else frantically begged, don't kill me. I'll withdraw from Heavenly Relic City and join your Central Plains human faction right now. Another pachai rang out. Yet another head soared skywards in despair. Fang Chen's voice was cold as iron. Only hell is fitting for you beasts. As the deity transformation exalts entered the battlefield and began mercilessly slaughtering the half-giants, those half-giant armies that had been joyously killing finally realized that calamity was upon them. They are human deity transformation exalts. How did they get here? Weren't all the state-level teleportation arrays sealed? The giant army panicked, the earth-shattering screams echoing around them, making every one of them tremble with fear. Just then, a majestic demon lord's aura suddenly erupted from a nearby corner. A gloomy voice rang out, fellow Taoists, please show mercy. Fang Chen and the others halted, looking with surprise at this suddenly appearing deity transformation realm demon lord. Ice Flame Demon Lord sized him up and asked in a deep voice, are you from the High Demon clan of the Myriad Demon Great State? Why are you here? Seeing that there were fellow demons among the opposing side, this new demon lord let out a slight breath of relief. He cupped his hands and said, I am Han Feng of the Myriad Demon Great State. My lord is the Black Dragon Grand Sage. We are currently guests within Heavenly Relic City. Upon hearing this, the half-giants who had been plunged into despair suddenly steadied their morale. They lifted their heads again and glared at Fang Chen and the others, their eyes full of arrogant ferocity. Did you really think our Heavenly Relic City is easy to push around? Why do you think our city lord would take away all the Dharma form realm half-giants? You never imagined that our Heavenly Relic City still has honored guests presiding over us. At these words, everyone's expressions changed slightly. The Black Dragon Grand Sage, he is actually here in Heavenly Relic City. Fang Chen also showed a look of surprise. No wonder they hadn't spotted any sign of the Black Dragon Grand Sage throughout the battle. It turned out he had led his trusted followers to hide within Heavenly Relic City. Han Feng clasped his hands behind his back and calmly surveyed everyone, let them resolve the matters of Gixu state themselves. Why should we exalts interfere? Please, give me some face, and don't make things difficult for these pitiful half-giants. Everyone's gazes instantly converged on Fang Chen. They would never hesitate to kill half-giants, but the Black Dragon Grand Sage and his demon lords were pure, blooded creatures of the Central Plains. How should they be dealt with? Fang Chen raised his hand with a gesture. 3 top-grade spirit swords instantly encircled him, their blades gleaming with cold light. With an indifferent expression, he coldly spoke, "Give you face and not make things difficult for the pitiful half. Giants, is that right?" As his words fell, the 3 spirit swords suddenly merged, transforming into a dazzling divine rainbow that carried world, destroying might as it viciously slashed forward. Caught off guard, Han Feng's pupils contracted sharply, and he frantically teleported away in a panic. But that divine rainbow was simply too fast. A dull sound of tearing flesh rang out, and a cleanly severed arm detached from his body. Crimson deity, transformation, essence blood rained down through the sky. Han Feng stumbled out of the void, his face contorted in pain as he roared in shock and fury. "Are you insane? I was just pleading for mercy. Even if you don't agree, why attack me?" Fang Chen stared at him coldly, his voice devoid of any warmth. When the humans of the Western continent were being one-sidedly massacred by the half-giants, why didn't you plead for the humans? Now that the half-giants are in trouble, you immediately jump out to play the good guy. His words were like knives, each one cutting deep. That crew of the Black Dragon Grand Sage, for the sake of a single seed of the tribulation, overcoming Black Lotus, recklessly opened the interlayer world and almost doomed the myriad demon great state. And now they secretly protect these half-giants, allowing these beasts to occupy the entire Gixu state, letting them wantonly slaughter the humans led by Starry Mountain. And now they shamelessly put on a neutral face and demand that we give them face. The Red Demon Grand Sage sneered, his voice full of disdain. "The lad Fang is right. Who do you think you are, worthy of us giving you face? Today, the half-giants must die." Han Feng's face was full of anger, but he couldn't utter a single word of rebuttal. He looked around, the gazes of those deity transformation exalts, brimming with killing intent, pierced him like icy knives. How could he dare to make enemies of so many? He glanced down at the half-giant army, gritted his teeth fiercely, and shouted, "Fine. I won't concern myself with their business anymore. You're on your own." His thoughts raced. He had to hurry back to fetch reinforcements. No matter what, he had to protect the half-giants. Heavenly Relic City was the last sanctuary for these demon traitors, and it absolutely must not be destroyed. Unexpectedly, just as this thought formed, a tricolored light suddenly flashed before him. That terrifying divine rainbow slashed towards him again. This time, he failed to dodge. A crisp sound of bone and flesh being severed rang out, and the divine rainbow cleaved him in two with a single strike. "Yeah." Amidst the harrowing scream, Han Feng's soul form flew out in panic, roaring in fury and shock. "I was leaving, and yet you still struck to kill me." The reply was Fang Chen's eyes, so cold they sent chills down his spine. Those who shelter half-giants share the same crime. A soul nail shot out from Fang Chen's forehead, the soul-shocking spike, straight at the opponent. Han Feng's expression drastically changed as his soul form desperately dove into the void. But it was too late. The soul nail struck it with precision, nailing its soul into oblivion on the spot. Its terrified cries faintly echoed from the void, intermittent. "Black Dragon Grand Sage, save me quickly." The sound abruptly stopped. A peerless expert at the Demon Lord realm had thus fallen in public. Fang Chen slowly shifted his gaze toward the half-giants on the ground. His voice seemed to drift up from the depths of hell, bone, chillingly cold. "Today, no one can save you." "I said so." As his words fell, he grasped his purple sword and swung it horizontally. Fierce purple sword aura instantly spread, and in an instant, over 10 half-giants were bisected at the waist. Harrowing screams and agonized roars shook the entire sky. The defiant arrogance on their faces completely faded, and all sank back into immense terror. Even the Black Dragon Grand Sage people, Fang Chen killed without hesitation. In this world, no one could protect them anymore. "Retreat, quickly retreat. Back to Heavenly Relic City." The sage set up a formation there. "As long as we flee back, we'll be safe." The words were still in its mouth when this half-giant was struck by a palm strike from the Red Demon Grand Sage from afar, reducing it to a pile of minced flesh. The Red Demon Grand Sage revealed a grim expression and said coldly, "You still want to go back? Today, none of you shall escape." The other deity transformation cultivators also took action. All across the battlefield, the half-giants burst into clouds of blood, missed one after another like crushed fruit. The nascent soul realm humans of Starry Mountain and the various sects of the Western continent, seeing from afar the deity transformation seniors of Taking, Great State arriving, reinforce them, were all greatly invigorated with thrilled expressions. When their gazes shifted again to those half giants retreating in panic like a tide, boundless hatred erupted in their eyes. What are we waiting for? Attack together, kill all these beasts. At that moment, the resentment accumulated over 1,000 years erupted completely. The human race of the Western continent launched the most merciless reckoning against these half-giants. The half-giants scattered on the spot, fleeing in utter disarray. Among them were those who roared in fury, feeling that as noble hunters, how could they have fallen to the point of being slaughtered? There were also those consumed by regret, wishing they had waited patiently for the sage to return before conquering the entire continent. There were even those whose faces twisted hideously, secretly grinding their teeth, vowing in their hearts that once they caught their breath, they would repay this 100-fold, 1,000-fold. Yet not a single one of them sincerely repented of their actions. But before the might of a deity transformation expert, their flight was meaningless. Barely half a day later, Fang Chen had already carved a bloody path from the heavenly abyss 7 cities, all the way to the eastern continent. A heavy, muffled crash resounded as a cloud of dust burst upward from the ground. The last half, giant with a 9-orifice golden body, filled with bitter unwillingness, crashed to the earth with a thunderous boom. His face was twisted with venomous hatred as he glared fixedly at Fang Chen and shrieked, "Our sage will never let you go." Fang Chen's expression remained utterly unmoved. With a casual sweep of his sword, he lopped off that snarling head. Thus, every golden, body half, giant who had participated in the rebellion was completely annihilated. At that very moment, the nascent soul realm experts of Starry Mountain Peak swiftly arrived. Each of their faces was alight with excitement, their eyes gleaming with incredulous light as they gazed up at the man they had once idolized. Disciples of Starry Mountain Peak, paying respects to the Starfire Venerable. Back then, Fang Chen had only been a peer who had twice crossed the celestial realm. But now, he had become a world-shaking deity transformation powerhouse, mighty enough to sway the tides of the entire Central Plains. This earth-shattering transformation left them feeling dazed, as if in a dream. Fang Chen looked at them, and the image of Fairy Ziwei surfaced involuntarily in his mind. Yet, as his gaze swept over the crowd, her figure was nowhere among them. Could it be that Fairy Ziwei had not participated in this battle? He gently shook his head and temporarily pushed aside all distracting thoughts. Now was not the time to worry about Liu Ruyan. He turned to look back and saw the corpses of the half-giants stretching for tens of thousands of miles, their blood and filth staining the mountains, rivers, and earth. Fang Chen furrowed his brow, his eyes filled with disgust. The blood of a pack of sinners has defiled the soil of our Central Plains. Everyone of Starry Mountain Peak, I must trouble you to clear the battlefield, burn their corpses, do not leave a single drop of their blood upon the Central Plains. Furthermore, all spoils taken in this battle shall belong to you. The disciples of Starry Mountain Peak and the experts of various sects were utterly overcome with excitement upon hearing this. These half-giants had occupied the eastern continent, robbing and slaughtering as they pleased. Who knew how many resources they had hoarded? Now that the Venerables looked down on them, all of it would benefit them instead. We respectfully obey the decree of the Starfire Venerable. The crowd answered in a roaring chorus of assent. The Red Demon Great Venerable and the others also arrived at that moment. Exchanging glances with Fang Chen, they all remained silently speechless. Then, they turned around in unison and teleported away toward the direction of Heaven's Remnant City. Since the slaughter of the half-giants had already reached this point, how could they allow the matter to end so half-heartedly? Within Heaven's Remnant City, inside the City Lord's mansion, the Black Dragon, Great Venerable, sat with his eyes tightly shut. A drop of the 10,000 spirits' ancestral blood, containing terrifying power, hovered before him. As he absorbed it, the pressure radiating from the Black Python Phantom behind him grew ever more suffocating. To his left and right, 2 demon experts at the Demon Lord realm guarded him as he cultivated. And beyond them, within this great hall, there was even a demonic cultivator at the deity transformation stage. It was a female demon venerable dressed in revealing attire, a faint, ambiguous smile playing upon her face. She leaned lazily against a chair, crossing a pair of fair, slender legs. Her delicate fingers toyed with the strand of hair that fell upon her shoulder, looking rather bored. This woman was none other than the demoness who had once wanted to take Fang Chen as her male consort. Now her cultivation had actually reached the second decay of the celestial man. Not only had she successfully escaped the pursuit of the desireless venerable, but she had also turned misfortune into blessing, advancing her cultivation yet another step. The demoness sighed faintly and began to grumble to herself. Now that the Void Return Prefecture has declared independence, it'll be so much harder for me to go to other prefectures. If I want to find a man, I'll have to cross the Dead Sea. What a bother. It's all because of my master, insisting I bring you this drop of 10,000 spirits' ancestral blood. The Black Dragon Great Venerable opened his eyes at that moment, putting away the drop of ancestral blood, and spoke unhurriedly. With that great figure as your backer, what are you worried about? As long as he protects you, you could swagger through even the Heaven Prefecture. Who would dare make trouble for you? The demoness still sighed, her tone carrying a hint of disdain. Him, heh. Thanks to my little darling, his existence has long been sensed by the sages of the Central Plains. Earlier, with the great war against the ancient giants, the sages had no attention to spare for him. Now that the Central Plains are at peace, do you think those sages will still tolerate him? Very soon, the sages of the Central Plains will find a way to smoke him out. He's hardly able to protect himself now. How could he possibly look after me? Upon hearing this, a speculative look appeared on the Black Dragon Great Venerable's face. Did the identity of this demoness's master have some problem? Was the other party not a sage of immense renown, deeply beloved by the Central Plains? He opened his mouth, about to ask for clarification. Suddenly, a feeling stirred within him, and he rushed violently outside the great hall. The demoness also sensed something. Her expression shifted and she shot to her feet, teleporting outside. She placed her hands above her eyes and gazed into the distance, muttering in shock and uncertainty, "Am I sensing this wrong? It's actually the deity transformation experts of our Central Plains. How did they get here?" As she muttered, a tremendous boom of shattered space resounded from the distant sky. A snow-white giant tiger was seen tearing through the clouds, teleporting all the way, arriving above Heaven's remnant city in the blink of an eye. Fang Chen rode the white tiger, on the verge of charging directly into the city. With a heavy, muffled crash, an invisible barrier array suddenly manifested, violently repelling the white tiger back. Where the impact struck, ripples like flowing water undulated outward. Fang Chen steadied himself, frowning slightly. There actually was a sage-level defensive array here. It seemed that after his last rampage through Heaven's remnant city, the Merciful Heart Sage had spared no expense to have this city fortified. That old dog had really gone out of his mind for these half-giants. Wang Chengxiao, little darling. Two completely different shouts came up from below. The Black Dragon Great Venerable's face was full of fury, while the demoness's face was full of delighted surprise. Both the true word Venerable and Moon Pearl simultaneously raised their eyebrows. Without any visible sign, they flanked Fang Chen, one on the left and one on the right. Moon Pearl looked the demoness up and down, taking in her revealing attire, and chuckled lightly. Have I gained a new little sister? The corner of Fang Chen's mouth involuntarily twitched. Helplessly, he said, Do I look like someone so fond of philandering? Upon hearing this, Moon Pearl and the true word Venerable both shot Fang Chen a massive collective eye roll. Fang Chen felt utterly speechless. Shaking his head, he slowly explained, She is a traitor to the demonic cultivators of the Great Wilderness Prefecture. She can hardly be considered a friend, but she's not exactly an enemy either. He remembered back when they were ambushed by the two Star Giant King. This demoness had even protected him alongside Green Pearl and the true word Venerable. That debt of gratitude he had always kept in his heart. Fang Chen shifted his gaze to the invisible barrier surrounding Heaven's remnant city, and looking around at everyone, asked, Does any of you have a way to break this array? At these words, everyone looked at each other and fell into silent helplessness. The Heart Demon Venerable said in a deep voice, This is an array personally laid down by a sage. It must contain the power of a sage. How could it be something we can break? Perhaps if the Great Venerables were here, there would be a way. They all carry, to a greater or lesser extent, sage-level magical treasures. Fang Chen sank into contemplation upon hearing this. He could, of course, use the 9-colored crystal to forcibly shatter this array, but to wipe out a few half-giant remnant spirits, that seemed like far too great a loss. Heh, little darling, you want to undo this array. The demoness crossed her arms, propping up the two plump mounds on her chest, and asked with a beaming smile, Why go through all this trouble? You just become my male consort, and I'll help you slaughter all those half-giants. How about it? Fang Chen glanced at her sidelong, fully aware that not a single word from this woman's mouth could be trusted. At the same time, a flicker of secret alarm rose in his heart. This woman had already thrown in her lot with the Asura Saint Sun. What on earth was she doing here? Fang Chen swept his gaze around, an unease settling in his heart. As long as the Asura Holy Sun remained alive, he would remain in constant peril. Very well, Fang Chen smoothly picked up the demoness's words. Then you first kill all those half-giants. The demoness let out a coquettish giggle. Hehe, my dear young master, still so hard to deceive. I advise you, young master, to leave at once, and do not even think about meddling with this formation. This formation contains the law of the Merciful Sage. Once attacked, the Merciful Sage will naturally sense it. Hearing this, the Black Dragon Great Venerable's face darkened, and he shouted angrily, "Why are you telling him?" He had been counting on these fools to attack the formation recklessly and summon the Merciful Sage. The demoness giggled gleefully. "He is my most beloved paramour. I certainly would not want him to die at the Merciful Sage's hands. Young master, go now. When I have free time, I will come find you naturally." Fang Chen's eyes narrowed slightly. He thought to himself, truly, thanks to the demoness's warning. This formation, either do not touch it, or if you do, you must shatter it instantaneously with a speed that catches even lightning unawares. Otherwise, once the Merciful Sage is summoned, forget about annihilating these half-giant remnants. He swept his gaze over the colossal Heaven's remnant city and saw that half-giants were hidden in every house, every concealed stronghold, even in the underground secret passages. A rough count showed no fewer than 100,000. If they are not eliminated today, from among these remnants will ceaselessly spawn half-giants at the Golden Body Realm and Dharma Manifestation Realm, who will still become a kank. On the Middle Continent. He hesitated no longer and immediately took out the 9-colored crystal. To permanently excise a tumor from the Middle Continent using the 9-colored crystal was not a waste. However, just as Fang Chen was about to activate the 9-colored crystal from all 4 directions of Heaven's remnant city, powerful fluctuations at the level of the 5 declines of Heave, En and Man erupted simultaneously. 4 terrifying attacks blasted fiercely against this sage-level formation. The massive formation immediately shuddered with a thunderous boom. The Black Dragon, Great Venerable's face drastically changed. He fixed his stare on the Great Venerable wave of monstrous aura to the east, and cried out in shock. "Golden Scale, Great Venerable, you dare oppose the Merciful Sage?" From the east came a bizarre, pinched, nasal voice. "I am not Golden Scale, Great Venerable. I am just passing by." Immediately afterwards, from the other 3 directions came voices that had been deliberately altered. "Me too, just passing by." "Me too. Me too." Fang Chen was startled at first, then immediately recognized that the owners of these voices were none other than the Golden Scale Great Venerable, the Myriad Arms Great Venerable, the Lord of the Starry Mountains, and the first rank Tower Master of Fang Mountain. Joy immediately appeared in his eyes. He had thought these Great Venerables were unwilling to come. He never expected that, like Fang Chen and the others, they were also willing to traverse the Divine Realm to exterminate these half-giants. It was just that they did not come openly. They all concealed their forms and sneakily struck from the shadows. However, were only the 4 of them here. Could it be that the Ice-Heart Great Venerable did not come? As Fang Chen was muttering to himself, a guilty, feeble voice suddenly came from directly above the formation. I'm also just passing by." The words were barely finished when a steel needle magical treasure imbued with sage-level fluctuations was suddenly hurled out of the void. Bearing an innate counterforce against formations, it viciously stabbed into the great formation. The already violently trembling formation, upon receiving this fatal strike from a formation, breaking treasure, could no longer hold. With a heaven-shaking boom, the enormous formation exploded on the spot. A flash of joy appeared in Fang Chen's eyes. He immediately shouted to the spirit transformation realm experts beside him, "All hands strike, time is pressing." Everyone's hearts tightened in unison. At this moment, the Merciful Sage might already be on his way back. A sage's power could tear open spatial barriers to travel. No one could say when he would arrive. Perhaps the very next moment. "You dare!" The Black Dragon Great Venerable flew into a rage, bellowing furiously. "The half-giant bloodline I, the Black Dragon Great Venerable, shall protect. Whoever dares to kill half-giants recklessly, I will not let off lightly." Boom. A golden serpentine shadow descended from the heavens, fiercely crashing into the Black Dragon Great Venerable's towering body, sending him flying 1,000 miles away. The Black Dragon Great Venerable was greatly shocked. "Golden Scale Great Venerable, you have also undergone atavism." Golden Scale Great Venerable, still pinching his nose, retorted, "You're the Golden Scale. Your whole family is Golden Scale." Before his words faded, the 7 stars of the Northern Dipper also descended from beyond the 9 heavens, bearing an overwhelming momentum of 10,000 jun, smashing down Toa, RDS, the Black Dragon, Great Venerable. Next, a hammer tempered through countless trials, radiating the might of a supreme, grade spirit artifact, also hammered down ferociously. At the same time, a bizarrely shaped poison, coated curved blade, seized the opportunity to cut through the air and strike. The 4 Great Venerables all ruthlessly launched vicious sneak attacks on the Black Dragon, Great Venerable. The Black Dragon, Great Venerable's expression contorted in terror. No matter how arrogant he was, he absolutely dared not oppose 4 Great Venerables at once. He glanced at Heaven's remnant city, gritted his teeth fiercely, and teleported away in a panic. At this moment, to say nothing of protecting the half-giants, even his own clansmen at the Demon Lord and Demon Emperor realms were completely beyond his care. Fang Chen, none of you saw anything, and none of us ever came. Golden Scale Great Venerable, still pinching his nose, hurriedly transformed into a streak of light and fled. The Merciful Sage would return within a few breaths. If they did not leave now, they would have no way to make excuses. The Lord of the Starry Mountains, the first rank Tower Master of Fang Mountain, and the Myriad Arms Great Venerable all promptly withdrew and fled. The Ice Heart Great Venerable also fled in a fluster, and before leaving, shot Fang Chen a fierce glare and urgently warned, "I was never here either, got it, do not you dare expose me." After all, the Great Venerables were different from Fang Chen and the others. Fang Chen and his group were all ordinary spirit transformation cultivators. Their words and actions represented only themselves. But the Great Venerables were the leaders of their respective regions. Every word and action represented their entire domains. If discovered by the Merciful Sage, it would easily implicate their regions. Fang Chen was speechless for a moment. Was this matter really worth a special reminder? Without time for further thought, he grabbed Yu Mingzhu and charged first into Heaven's remnant city. He flipped his hand, and the mountain and river cauldron appeared majestically. Inside the cauldron lay densely packed pearl-sized condensed magma. This was precisely the magma concentrate from the fire, well of the fire-worshipping sect. Each pearl could easily kill a cultivator at the late-stage nascent soul realm. For those below the nascent soul realm, it was nothing short of a natural disaster descending. With a fierce sweep of his hand, those magma pearls scattered through the air as he flew, settling all over Heaven's remnant city. After landing, the magma pearls burst open, instantly transforming into a heaven-filling sea of magma fire. As hundreds of magma pearls rained down, a good portion of Heaven's remnant city turned into a boiling magma lake. Whether hiding inside houses, in secret strongholds, or buried underground, no living being could escape. Several demon lords quickly brought their demon race experts soaring into the sky, fleeing in panic, their scalps tingling with fear. This method is too vicious. It is completely aimed at the total annihilation of the half-giants. The demoness watched and giggled coquettishly. "My little master, you are becoming more and more manly. I really like that." She took out a jade talisman, flicked it with her finger, and shot it toward Fang Chen. Then she teleported away from this slaughter field. Towards the half-giants, she felt not the slightest pity in her heart, nor had any intention of lending a hand to save them. Fang Chen was not the only ruthless one. Every spirit transformation venerable who came here struck with merciless ferocity. Even Yu Mingzhu had long gone bloodthirsty. The moment she unleashed the pitch-black steel wire in her hand, countless half-giant lives were reaped in an instant. In just 10 breaths, the vast Heaven's remnant city had turned into a blazing sea of fire, descending into a living hell on earth. As far as the eye could see, no living soul remained. But to ensure absolute certainty, the Red Demon Great Venerable joined forces with Zhong Wuya, activating the divine steel of misfortune, unleashing the immense power of the 3 declines of heaven and man, Baron G down until the entire Heaven's remnant city sank deeper and deeper, until they punched clean through the earth, and the city plunged into the churning magma layer. As Heaven's remnant city was slowly submerged by magma, some half-giants who had been playing dead or managed to survive by luck finally charged out in sheer terror. Their only response was the merciless crushing slaughter of the 2. Finally, when Heaven's remnant city completely sank into the magma, melting into a flowing, incandescent liquid, the 2 finally stopped. Thus, the half-giant bloodline that had taken root in the Middle Continent for 1,000 years was at last completely exterminated. Not a single one left. Fang Chen exhaled deeply, the great weight upon his heart finally lifting this festering blight that had plagued them for years, was at last completely purged. Perhaps future generations would accuse them of cruelty and inhumanity. But if they could pave a path of peace for future descendants, then such infamy, they could bear it and bear it willingly. Fang Chen dared not relax in the slightest and gave a deep, voiced order. We must hasten to the Heavenly Observatory and repair the prefecture-level teleportation array in the shore. Test time possible, then evacuate all from return to Void Prefecture. The Sage of Compassionate Heart is about to return. Everyone's heart chilled, all having realized this. If the Sage of Compassionate Heart were to see this horrific state of Heaven's remnant city, Heaven only knows how enraged he would become. He might instantly go mad. Suddenly, the white tiger was the first to detect a terrifying, dangerous aura rapidly approaching. It anxiously growled low at the group, then turned and bolted madly toward the direction of the 7 cities of the heavenly abyss. It deliberately slowed its pace to allow everyone to leap onto its broad back. None dared delay. They flashed onto the tiger's back and teleported away. Yu Mingzhu also grabbed Fang Chen's hand, about to move, but found that she could not pull him at all. She spun around abruptly and saw Fang Chen still standing in place, his expression calm, showing no intention of leaving. Yu Mingzhu's voice became shrill with urgency. Fang Chen, hurry. The Sage of Compassionate Heart wants to kill you most of all. Fang Chen gave her a deep look, slowly released her hand, and said in a tone that brooked no argument, "You go with them first." The Sage of Compassionate Heart's return was only a matter of breaths. And from here to the Heavenly Observatory, the journey was long. They could not escape at all. Unless one person remained behind to block that sage alone. Even before the expedition, Fang Chen had already decided on that candidate himself. Yu Mingzhu instantly understood Fang Chen's intention. Her gaze trembled violently. You'll die doing this. A deity transformation, cultivator against a sage. What difference is there between that and a mortal facing a deity transformation? The opponent need only a thought for Fang Chen to be utterly annihilated. Fang Chen reached out and gently stroked her cheek, his voice calm but resolute. Mingzhu, some things must be done by someone. The half-giant race should have been extinct 1,000 years ago. It was the Sage of Compassionate Heart who, for his own selfish desires, kept them, bringing 1,000 years of suffering to return to Void Prefecture and causing countless casualties in today's Central Plains. This bloody debt must be claimed by someone. My days are numbered, so let it be me. On behalf of Wang King Yelao, on behalf of Return to Void Prefecture, on behalf of the entire Central Plains, I will demand this unworthy sage abdicate. He is unworthy of being a sage. Yu Mingzhu froze at these words, abruptly grasped Fang Chen's hand, and asked in a trembling voice, "You have little time left. What do you mean?" Fang Chen looked up to see that everyone had already vanished over the horizon with the white tiger, leaving only Lin Jinyu, a nascent soul cultivator, frantically flying into the distance. He pulled Yu Mingzhu into a deep embrace and whispered, "The Elder of Heavenly Secrets once divined the Heavenly Secrets for me, Liu Dao Shangren, and Tian Ting Bodhisattva. The 3 of us were all destined to die in the near future. Now, Tian Ting Bodhisattva has already fallen to tribulation as predicted. Next, it will be me and Liu Dao Shangren." It was as if a thunderbolt exploded in Yu Mingzhu's mind. She had heard her master mention the Elder of Heavenly Secrets before. The heavenly secrets he divined never missed, always coming true. Since the Elder of Heavenly Secrets had divined that Fang Chen would die, it would certainly happen. Yu Mingzhu finally understood why, after their reunion in the Myriad Demon's great prefecture, he had shed his usual reserve and become so open about their relationship. Even contrary to his nature, promising that once the battle with the ancient giants was over, he would marry her. It turned out it was because he knew his allotted fate was short, and he wanted to give her everything she desired in the little time he had left. Fang Chen, Yu Mingzhu suddenly threw her arms around his waist, holding him tightly, sobbing uncontrollably, "No, this can't be true. I don't want you to die. We promised to marry, promised to grow old together. We finally made it this far after so much hardship. I won't let you go, sub." She stomped her foot in desperation, tears pouring like rain. Fang Chen gently patted her back and softly urged, "All right, you must go now. Don't distract me. That will only make me more endangered." At that moment, Venerable True Word, sensing something amiss, also turned back. Seeing their sorrowful expressions, she couldn't help but ask in surprise, "What's wrong with you two?" Fang Chen didn't explain, only said in a deep voice, "Take Yu Mingzhu and leave quickly. I'll cover your retreat. Don't ask more. Go." He could already feel the atmospheric essence churning violently between heaven and earth. The Sage of Compassionate Heart was tearing through the spatial barrier, rushing back at extreme speed. "Cover the retreat." Venerable True Word's pupils abruptly constricted. In an instant, She understood Fang Chen's plan and knew full well the outcome. In a daze, she seemed to see the shadow of her father, the star abyss great venerable, behind Fang Chen. The two figures, at this moment, actually overlapped completely. Fang Chen barked in a low voice, "Go now." He shoved Yu Mingzhu into Venerable True Word's arms. Venerable True Word bit her red lips, tears glistening in her eyes. She grabbed Yu Mingzhu and, without a word, turned and teleported away. Only after she had sped far off did the unworthy tears slide down her cheeks. She murmured, "One after another, all of them only know how to sacrifice themselves." After sending the two away, Fang Chen decisively brought out the 9 dragon demon cauldron, the 9, colored crystal, and the bronze hell beast. His gaze swept over the last item, then he suddenly raised his head and locked onto Lin Jinyu, who had already fled to the distant horizon. Fang Chen smiled coldly. "You can't leave." He took out the void fishing rod, flicked it through the air, and the fishing line shot out, directly hooking Lin Jinyu and yanking him back forcefully. Lin Jinyu looked around, his face drastically changed, and quavered. "Senior Xinghuo, what are you doing?" Fang Chen half smiled. "This venerable one told you long ago that I'd broaden your horizons. The experience of a battle between sages is a rare encounter. If you leave now, you won't see it." Lin Jinyu's eyes trembled violently, inwardly roaring. A battle of the sage level. Even a stray shockwave could devastate heaven and earth. How could a nascent soul cultivator like him broaden his horizons from that? The more he thought, the more suspicious it seemed. Fang Chen was treating him far too well. It wasn't until his peripheral vision suddenly caught sight of that bronze hell beast that his heart lurched violently. He snapped his gaze toward Fang Chen. He understood. His identity as a hell beast had long been seen through by Fang Chen. Bringing him here was solely to use his blood to activate the sacrificial artifact. Lin Jinyu's eyes darted around desperately. He whipped out a dagger, aimed it at his own heart, and threatened fiercely, "Don't come closer. If I die, the blood will be useless." Fang Chen only responded with a sharp, piercing look. Instantly, Lin Jinyu trembled all over, unable to move a single inch, and the dagger clattered to the ground. Immediately after, his skin cracked inch by inch, exploding into a cloud of blood mist. A colossal, ferocious beast materialized from the blood mist. It was the true form of the hell beast. Even after revealing its true form, it still trembled in fear under Fang Chen's gaze, not daring to act recklessly. Fang Chen stated flatly, "Before a venerable, is life and death yours to control." A deity transformation venerable had long transcended ordinary life levels. Back then, the vile crow venerable had immobilized his nascent soul self with just a single look. Let out one this mere core formation hell beast. The hell beast cried out in a trembling voice, "You, my blood, is useless even if you take it. This is a bronze sacrificial artifact. It can only be activated by chanting the sacrificial inscriptions, which only the nobility of the hell realm can master." Fang Chen interrupted indifferently, "Isn't it the book of summoning the sage's advent? Rest assured, I know it." The hell beast was stunned into silence. A human actually knew the sacrificial inscriptions of the hell realm nobility. Now even its last shred of hope was gone. Fang Chen casually waved his hand, and the 9-dragon demon cauldron crashed down with a thunderous boom. Though the cauldron wasn't huge for a 9th layer core formation hell beast, it was as heavy as Mount Tai. It was instantly crushed flat to the ground, its 4 limbs struggling in vain, but unable to budge it in the slightest. Having subdued the hell beast, Fang Chen stood with his hands behind his back, quietly awaiting the return of the Sage of Compassionate Heart. He didn't have to wait long. After just a few breaths, the atmospheric essence between heaven and earth began churning like boiling water. The ground beneath his feet also began to quake violently, as if some great terror had torn open the hell and was returning from below. Then came an earth-shattering, explosive crack, and the spatial barrier was violently torn apart. Beside the ruins of Sky Remnant City, a long void fissure suddenly split open. A dark-skinned, gaunt-faced old man with a hooked nose, appearing around 80 years old, rushed out from the void. Behind him, a massive tentacle barely grazed his body, nearly coiling around him. Fortunately, the rift closed in time, trapping the horrifying tentacle within the void. This hooked-nosed old man before them was none other than the Compassionate Heart Sage. Sensing a change in the formations of Sky Remnant City, he unhesitatingly abandoned the Tian Province battlefield, disregarding the peril of several other sages, and directly tore through the spatial barrier to rush back. He never expected that while crossing the void, he would run into the calamity, defying Black Lotus, nearly meeting his end in its maw. Without time to ponder what that was exactly, he urgently looked towards Sky Remnant City, which he cherished as his lifeline. However, what met his eyes was nothing but a colossal pit of magma, churning with scorching bubbles. Some as yet unmelted buildings of Sky Remnant City bobbed up and down in the boiling magma, silently telling the final fate of the city. He stood rooted to the spot, staring blankly ahead, unable to believe the scene before him. He muttered to himself, "How can this be? Where are my followers? They must be safe, right?" Just then, he suddenly sensed something. Looking sideways, he saw a young man in black, standing with hands behind his back, his figure reflected in the sage sunken eye sockets. A raging flame instantly ignited deep within his eye sockets, and his voice trembled with fury. "Fang Chen, what have you done to my followers?" Fang Chen casually dusted off a bit of half-giant bloodstain from his robes. He lightly brushed it off and asked back, "Which part are you asking about?" "That bunch of beastly followers who let the Giant King's main force go to the primordial Chaos Province and attacked the Western continent." "I've already killed them all." "What?" The Compassionate Heart Sage trembled violently all over. The vast and majestic heavenly might unique to a sage erupted abruptly, shaking the very heavens and earth. All living things bowed and trembled under this terrifying aura, as if life itself was on the brink of annihilation. As the saying goes, when a sage is enraged, all things perish. The great libationer of each province could sweep away countless ancient giants with a single move. That is the best description of a sage's power. Beneath the sage, all are but ants. Those in the 5 declines of heaven and man, and mere mortals, are no different before a sage. The ground beneath Fang Chen's feet could no longer bear the sage's might, and with a terrifying cracking sound, the earth split open. Yet Fang Chen's figure remained utterly unmoved, as steady as a mountain. Multicolored radiance surged from within him, easily fending off the world, destroying pressure of the Compassionate Heart Sage. The Compassionate Heart Sage's eyes grew bloodshot. Those were his Golden Body Realm followers whom he had painstakingly nurtured. They numbered over 2,000, his greatest source of merit. Fang Chen had actually killed them all. "You little beast," the Compassionate Heart Sage, like a volcano that had been suppressed for 10,000 years, finally erupted with an earth-shattering roar. But he did not attack immediately. He had to first ask where the residents of Sky Remnant City were. These 100,000 residents were his foundation. As long as they remained, he could still continuously cultivate Golden Body Realm and Dharma Idol Realm giants in the future. Suppressing the surging killing intent that threatened to consume him, he demanded, "Where have you taken the residents of Sky Remnant City? Hand them over." Fang Chen's expression was indifferent, his tone eerily calm. I sent them to hell as well, leaving not a single one. If you go fish in the lava now, you might still salvage a few remnants." The Compassionate Heart Sage sharply sucked in a breath of cold air. That was a whole 100,000 giants, not a few hundred, not a few thousand, but an entire 100,000. Fang Chen spared not a single one, killing them all. "I don't believe you could do something so vicious." The Compassionate Heart Sage lowered his head, gazed at the vast magma lake below, and abruptly pressed his palm downward. The magma in the lake immediately churned violently. Everything that had sunk to the bottom was flipped to the surface. Tens of thousands of the distinctive large skeletons of giants rose up in unison. The Compassionate Heart Sage's eyes instantly lost focus. In his sight, everything turned pitch black. They really were all in there. Not even a single seed was left for him. He had been the most envied among all the sages, because his followers were the most loyal. Though only 100,000 giants, they did not believe in other sages, only in him, the Compassionate Heart Sage alone. The merit they coalesced was far, far greater than that of other sages' followers. Had nothing gone wrong, he would have been the first among all sages to advance to the Two-Calamity Sage realm. As the giant population grew larger, he would also have been the first to reach the Three-Calamity Sage realm in the future. If the giants could occupy half of the Central Plains, it would not have been impossible for him to reach the Saint realm. But now everything was over. Fang Chen had killed them all. His sage status had originated from those giants. Now that the giants were gone, he could not simply swap to a new batch of followers like other sages. His path to immortality was thus utterly sealed. He was furious, hysterically furious, uncontrollably furious. Had some sage intervened and interrupted his path to immortality, he would have admitted defeat. But now he was actually extinguished on his path to immortality by a divine transformation cultivator, a mere ant. This brought him incomparable fury. Fang Chen, the compassionate Heart Sage's eyes were blood, red, like a thoroughly enraged heaven, devouring beast staring fixedly at Fang Chen. His roar instantly overturned the earth, exposing the crimson magma layer beneath without reservation. In an instant, the land for 10,000 miles around turned into a boundless sea of magma and flames. The crimson magma reflected off the sky, dyeing the world a murky red, as if it were a hell on earth. And all this was merely from a single roar of his. Fang Chen remained steadfast. Before him appeared a jade shield out of nowhere, deflecting all the horrific pressure contained within the roar. At the same time, on his chest, a broken golden feather continuously radiated light. He also gazed at the compassionate Heart Sage, sensing the mighty aura of heavenly power from the other, yet his eyes grew even sharper. Fang Chen shouted in a deep voice, "Such mighty power, and yet it is neither used to go beyond the heavens to eradicate the source of all evil, nor to help the central planes turn the tide. Instead, it is all kept to protect a beast like you, who brings calamity upon the central planes. You do not deserve this power, nor the position of sage." Before his words finished, Fang Chen's entire aura surged, his robes billowing. He cupped his fists and faced the compassionate Heart Sage from afar, bellowing a thunderous proclamation. Fang Chen of the Great Taking State bid the compassionate Heart Sage, abdicate and yield to the worthy. This resounding shout echoed across the ancient land. A mere divine transformation cultivator actually uttered words that were earth-shattering and never before heard in all history, bidding a sage to abdicate. This cry instantly spread to all directions. The disciples of the Starry Mountain sect who were cleaning up the battlefield all raised their heads to the sky, their vision gradually blurring. Finally, someone had voiced the millennia, long bitter history of the human race in Gixu province. Their homeland had been forcibly partitioned away by half. Their prosperity had been wantonly plundered by half giants. Their women had been captured and defiled by half giants. Their resistance fighters had been slaughtered to the last by half giants. They could not retaliate. They had to swallow their grievances and coexist peacefully with the half giants.
Why?
All because those half giants had a sage shielding them. Time and again, he pressured humanity to tolerate, to forgive, to not be fussy, yet never once restrained the half giants' atrocities. Is such a person truly worthy of the title sage? Now, at last, someone had spoken the voice of their hearts. The compassionate heart is unworthy of being a sage. The people who had fled far away also heard that distant shout. In their hearts were shock, admiration, and emotion. The red demon, Great Venerable, looked back, his eyes revealing immense gratified relief. He sighed softly. "I have not clung to my wretched existence in vain for this millennium. After 1,000 years, I can still witness the birth of such a paragon of humanity. Even if I die, I will have no regrets." He turned his head and said with a smile to the true word, "Venerable, old friend, stop playing dead. Come with me." There was a squirming in his bosom, and the jade paper heavenly book flew out from it. From the book emerged a tiny person who had just finished bathing, huffing angrily, who's playing dead. "I just happened to be bathing, that's all." The little figure's tone shifted, her voice brimming with excitement, a spirit transformation cultivator forcing a sage to abdicate. "Heh, such a lively affair, how could I miss it?" Then she softly said to Zhang Wai, "You, Xiao Yan, Xiao Hong and I are leaving now, we shall meet again." Her parting words faintly revealed her unease about this journey. This departure, most likely, she would never return. Jiang Wai, you felt a resonance in his heart and declared loudly, "The vast universe, righteous energy endures forever. On the path of righteousness, how can I let my sworn brother walk alone?" He attempted to control the calamity divine steel, trying to fly over to provide support. But the calamity divine steel trembled violently, completely beyond his control. Threads of fresh blood began to seep out from the divine steel. That was the blood of the calamity sage. He had been impaled by the spear of the Nine, Sun Giant Emperor. His heart's blood splattered upon this very divine steel. Now, as if sensing something, it was about to manifest the will of the calamity sage before everyone. Jiang Wai, you instantly understood the divine steel's intent. He could not help but sigh heavily. "Ah, merciful heart, even the divine steel can no longer tolerate you." Within the calamity, divine steel was sealed a single strike of the calamity sage's power. Earlier, during the great battle against the ancient giants, even in such a dire and tragic situation, the divine steel had never unleashed this strike. But now, merely with Fang Chen's single sentence, "I ask the sage to abdicate," the divine steel was thoroughly activated. The reason was simple. The calamity sage had died from betrayal by his own people. Jiang Wei Yu's gaze sharpened, and he declared resolutely, "Then follow me into battle." Over the ruins of the heavenly ruined city, throughout heaven and earth still echoed the words, "We ask the Merciful Heart Sage to step down and yield his position to the worthy." It was like the lingering might of thunder, unending. The Merciful Heart Sage laughed from sheer rage. "You want me to abdicate and yield to the worthy? Just you, Fang Chen of Taking Great Province." His voice had just faded when a clear and resonant voice came from the horizon. "The Lord of the Star Mountain of Gixu Province asks the Merciful Heart Sage to step down and yield his position to the worthy." Immediately after, the silver-haired Lord of Star Mountain flickered and appeared beside Fang Chen. She had already left, but upon hearing Fang Chen's skysh-attering cry, she ultimately resolutely returned. The Merciful Heart Sage's face darkened, and he said gloomily, "You cannot represent Gixu Province. I am the one who rules here." But before his words faded, another deep and thunderous voice rolled in. "Golden Scale of the 10,000 Demons' Great Province asks the Merciful Heart Sage to step down and yield his position to the worthy." As soon as that voice arrived, one after another, voices rose in succession. Wan Bing of the Divine Armament Province stood with head held high, voice shaking the clouds. "We ask the Merciful Heart Sage to step down and yield his position to the worthy." Bing Xin of the Sacred Spirit Province, brows taut with killing intent, shouted fiercely, "We ask the Merciful Heart Sage to step down and yield his position to the worthy." Wu Ming of the Primordial Chaos Province clasped his hands behind his back and enunciated each word. "We ask the Merciful Heart Sage to step down and yield his position to the worthy." 5 great sovereigns returned one after another, arraying themselves on either side of Fang Chen, their expressions stern. Their stance was unmistakable. Of the 9 provinces under heaven, representatives from 6 provinces openly demanded the Merciful Heart Sage to abdicate. The Merciful Heart Sage's face twisted, and he roared furiously, "You are not enough." At that moment, a succession of booming voices suddenly erupted from the direction of Star Mountain. It was the joint roar of the human powerhouses from Star Mountain and various sects. Thousands of shouts rang out in unison, echoing between heaven and earth. The first cry, "We ask the Merciful Heart Sage to step down and yield his position to the worthy." Then the tide of voices surged even higher. "We ask the Merciful Heart Sage to step down and yield his position to the worthy." Finally, the roar that condensed the will of all central lands resounded for the 3rd time. "We ask the Merciful Heart Sage to step down and yield his position to the worthy." This was by no means the cry of a single person. It was the will of all living beings in the central lands. The Merciful Heart Sage staggered, his heart faltering as he shouted harshly, "Shut up, all of you, shut up. I am a merit sage recognized by the saint. What are you people? A bunch of ants. What right do you have to make me abdicate? All of you get lost, or else I'll kill you as well." Great Sovereign Golden Scale stepped forward, fearless, and shouted, "If you have the guts, kill us all. Let's see how long you can survive." That challenge immediately made the Merciful Heart Sage clench his teeth. He thought to himself, "If I really slaughter the great sovereigns of 6 provinces, where in the central lands would I have a place to stay?" He still did not want to leave the central lands. He was currently injured. If he went to the myriad realms of the heavens, he would be like a fat lamb delivered to the door in the eyes of foreign sages. At the very least, he needed to heal his wounds before leaving the central lands. Thus he hesitated, not daring to start a massacre. But as he hesitated, a cadenced, sinister voice suddenly appeared in his mind. "Heh, still dreaming. The 9 grand libationers and several sages have already reached a consensus to destroy your merit, divine steel, and depose your position as sage. 3 sages are already on their way to Gixu Province."
What?
The Merciful Heart Sage's expression drastically changed, and he cried out in disbelief, "Impossible. I haven't committed any error. On what grounds would they destroy my merit, divine steel? On what grounds would they depose me from my position as sage?" That sinister voice reappeared in his mind. "On the grounds that you instigated the giants to seize Gixu Province for independence. There is no longer a place for you in the central lands. Flee quickly, or it will be too late."
SSS?
The Merciful Heart Sage scalp went numb. How did the sages come to know about the messages he had secretly sent to Heavenly Ruined City? Splitting the central lands and seizing territory for independence, this was an utterly heinous crime. His original plan had been to secretly goad the giants into doing it, while he, the sage, pretended to learn of it only after the fact. Once the die was cast, even if the other sages were displeased, they could not blame him. But he never expected that his scheme had been intercepted by the other sages in advance. Now, not only would the sages not spare him, but even the saint would never let him off lightly. He could no longer stay in the Central Lands. A thought stirred in his heart. He wanted to cleave open the world barrier and flee into the void to take refuge. But when he glanced at Fang Chen, the 5 great sovereigns, and the endless stream of Central Lands beings rushing over from the horizon, a murderous gleam burst forth in his eyes. His face filled with venomous hatred, he roared, "Since the Central Lands cannot tolerate me, then I cannot tolerate you rebellious lot. You want me to abdicate and yield to the worthy. You don't know your place. All of you die." He had never had any compassion for the beings of the Central Lands. Now, thoroughly enraged, his ferocious nature was fully revealed, and he no longer bothered to pretend. With a raise of his hand, a terrifying law of time surged forth. A single strike would be enough to annihilate everyone present. But Fang Chen had long been poised for action. The 9-dragon demon cauldron in his hands was enveloped by a force of space, instantly teleporting away to directly strike at the Merciful Heart Sage. With a sweep of his gaze, the Merciful Heart Sage knocked the 9-dragon demon cauldron out of its spatial shift. Under the pressure of his gaze, the cauldron shook violently, emitting a groan of unbearable strain on the verge of exploding. At this critical moment, 9 resounding cries suddenly pierced everyone's souls. At the far end of the horizon, the Red Devil Great Sovereign held a jade paper, heavenly scripture, in her left hand, and the 9 phoenixes facing the Tao hairpin in her right. Beside her, the remnant soul of the lustful sage continuously poured soul energy into the hairpin. A towering parasol tree actually grew out of the hairpin from nothingness. From the tree, 9 enormous bronze phoenix birds spread their wings and swooped down. Crying out, they transformed into 9 streaks of light, diving instantaneously toward the Merciful Heart Sage. On the Merciful Heart Sage's ferocious face, a hint of gravity finally appeared. The jade paper heavenly scripture and the 9 phoenixes facing the Tao hairpin are those from 2 female sages of 1,000 years ago. Though those 2 female sages were now merely remnant souls, they wielded legendary artifacts of great renown from back then. Together, their power was astonishing. As the 9 giant phoenix birds swooped in, he redirected the temporal law originally meant to obliterate everyone toward the incoming birds. Under the law of time reversal, the 9 phoenix birds rapidly shrank before the naked eye, until they turned into tiny green specks and dissipated into the air. The towering parasol tree also quickly shrank, reverting to its initial state. The temporal law, still undiminished, directly engulfed the 2. The Merciful Heart Sage breathed a sigh of relief and then mocked, "So it was just an empty show, you gave me a fright. 2 dead hags, if the ancient giants 1,000 years ago failed to kill you completely, then I'll send you on your way." After all, the Red Devil Great Sovereign and the Lustful Sage were only remnant souls. Their combined strike merely reached the peak of the 5 decays of heaven and man. If they had caught him off guard, they might have wounded the Merciful Heart Sage, but in a head-on confrontation, they had no chance of victory. Now that the 2 were shrouded by the temporal law, their remnant souls were visibly diminishing at a rapid pace. The soul energy they had painstakingly recovered over a millennium was dissipating swiftly. Just as they plunged into a colossal crisis, the misfortune god Steel suddenly materialized above the Merciful Heart Sage's head and smashed down with brutal force. The Merciful Heart Sage let out a disdainful sneer. A mere remnant soul dares to strike at this sage. Die. He flicked up a finger, and a terrifying power pierced straight through the stone steel and into its depths. But the steel answered with an enraged, roaring tremor. The blood of the misfortune sage upon its surface swiftly coalesced into a crimson character calamity. That character calamity abruptly tore free of the steel and shot straight at the Merciful Heart Sage. The Merciful Heart Sage's pupils contracted violently. He cried out in shock, "There is a sage strike within this steel." He tried to dodge, but it was already far too late. In an instant, the character calamity imprinted itself upon the crown of his head, radiating deadly misfortune that corroded his body. The Kai and blood within him reversed course, and the laws he had gathered in his palm suddenly fell into chaos. His entire body lurched and staggered uncontrollably, utterly robbed of combat strength. Seeing this, the Red Demon Great Venerable urgently cried, quickly, once more. She held the jade paper, heavenly book in her hands, and once again activated the 9 phoenixes' homage to the Tao hairpin. 9 phoenixes streaked in and pierced through his body in swift succession. The Merciful Heart Sage struggled with all his might, roaring, "Get away! All of you, get away! You worthless insects!" The 9 phoenixes seized his soul and began dragging it forcibly out of him. Yet the man was, after all, a sage, and one who had entered sagehood through merit. His soul was pulled out only halfway, before it could be dragged no further. Fang Chen's eyes flashed. He seized the opportunity in an iron grip.
Go.
The 9 dragons' demon cauldron howled as it hurtled savagely toward the Merciful Heart Sage. At this very moment, with misfortune crashing upon him, the Merciful Heart Sage glared with venomous hatred, intent on swatting the cauldron away. Then a miraculous sight unfolded. The 9 dragons' demon cauldron was indeed knocked aside, but it traced a bizarre arc and swung right back. It smashed squarely onto the Merciful Heart Sage's chest. This was the power of misfortune. At this, everyone struck out together. What astonished them even more was that, by all logic, as great venerables, they should barely have been able to injure the Merciful Heart Sage. Yet their attacks always landed with eerie precision on his weakest points. Some blasted toward his eyes, some struck his neck, and some even happened to fly directly into his mouth. The Ice Heart Great Venerable's blow, by a bizarre twist of fate, smashed right between the Merciful Heart Sage's legs. An agonized scream, the most wretched heard since the battle began, rent the air. The Ice Heart Great Venerable's beautiful face flushed red. She spat, catching my strike with that shameless spot, you old lecher. The Merciful Heart Sage was overcome with shame and fury. These attacks harmed him little, but the humiliation was beyond measure. He bellowed, "You court death." His eyes blazed bloodshot, and the veins on his neck bulged taut. A fearsome sage might erupted like a tidal surge, sweeping through the 8 directions. Though under the influence of misfortune, this strike could not manifest world. Annihilating power, it still blasted all 5 great venerables, the red demon, the lustful sage, and he others clear into the outer heavens. Muffled groans mingled with streaks of fresh blood, scattering in all directions. In a single instant, they were all grievously wounded. The gulf between a sage and the divine transformation realm was simply too vast. Even if he stood motionless, they could scarcely take his life. What made their blood run colder still was that the Merciful Heart Sage had been thoroughly enraged. Behind him, a brilliant golden stone steel suddenly manifested. The Merit God Steel, the Sage Supreme trump card. Much like the domain of a divine transformation powerhouse, once the power of merit within the steel was unleashed, the sage gained peerless combat strength. The Merciful Heart Sage glanced up at the character Calamity hovering above his head and snarled, "Begone." Before his words faded, the Merit God's steel behind him blazed with golden radiance. A torrential power of merit surged forth like a tidal wave, forcefully shattering the character Calamity into dust. In the next breath, he turned his chilling gaze toward Fang Chen, the only one still remaining on the field. At that moment, a snow-white great bell, over 10 feet tall, hovered before Fang Chen. It was this bell that had absorbed much of the Merciful Heart Sage's earlier assault. Add to that the snow-white shield guarding his front, which had blocked the vast majority of the shockwaves. Even so, Fang Chen was shaken to the point of coughing up mouthfuls of blood. The Merciful Heart Sage's face twisted with venom as he roared, "You little beast, you deserve to die more than anyone. If it weren't for you, I wouldn't have fallen to this point. Starting with you, I'll slaughter every last one of you." The Merit God's steel behind him erupted with dazzling golden light once again. A blast of merit power, overwhelming as a force that topples the withered, surged like a golden torrent at the immortal king's indestructible bell before Fang Chen. Even if this bell had once been matchless beneath the heavens, now it was damaged and broken. How could it withstand such a blow? Yet Fang Chen showed no fear whatsoever. He wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth and said with a cold smirk, "Old dog, look at your chest before you speak." The Merciful Heart Sage instinctively looked down and saw a crystal swirling with 9 colors, which had been stuck to his chest at some unknown moment by a thick, dense demonic fluid. He instantly recalled that this was the true killing move Fang Chen had attached when he slammed the 9 dragons' demon cauldron into him earlier. Enveloped by the dense demonic fluid, the 9 colored crystal's aura had been completely concealed without leaking the slightest trace. Now that he probed carefully, he was horrified to detect the terrible power contained within it. Before he could react, Fang Chen's indifferent voice reached his ears, "Detonate." At the instant the word fell, reflected in his rapidly dilating pupils, the 9 colored crystal burst apart with a mighty roar. The 9 colored tribulation lightning, potent enough to annihilate a sage, transformed into a boundless sea of lightning, akin to divine punishment descending from the heavens, and engulfed the Merciful Heart Sage completely in the blink of an eye. Fang Chen's heart hammered wildly.
Success.
He had long lost count of how many times he had wanted to use that 9 colored crystal, yet various reasons always prevented him from doing so. In the end, it was not spent on the battlefield of the ancient giants, but upon the Merciful Heart Sage. It was as if in the dark everything had been preordained. The white-robed skeleton had once said that once this crystal was activated, few sages in the Central Earth could withstand it. How could the Merciful Heart Sage, a sage nursing injuries in the Central Earth, possibly endure it? However, what made Fang Chen's pupils abruptly contract was this. The 9-colored tribulation lightning that had swallowed the Merciful Heart Sage was rapidly shrinking. Torrent after torrent of immense time, reversal laws, bolstered to an unprecedented height by a ceaseless infusion of merit power, was forcibly suppressing the raging 9-colored lightning, reversing it back toward its original state. After only a short while, the Merciful Heart Sage's savage face emerged from the gaps in the lightning. His face a mask of ferocity and savage glee, he raved, "Hey, so you even have a nice little treasure like this. That's excellent. This thing apart from the great libationer of taking great prefecture and the Buddha Lord of the heavenly state, nobody can withstand it. Since you've delivered this grand gift, I'll use it to kill another sage and loot everything they have while I'm at it." It would be far too bitter to leave the Central Earth empty-handed like this. There was no panic on Fang Chen's face. How could he have placed all his hopes of slaying a sage on a single 9-colored crystal? He raised a hand, and the bronze-held desolate beast vessel floated into the air before him. He lifted his hand again and made a slicing motion through the air toward the body of the held desolate beast that lay paralyzed nearby, pinned by the 9 dragons' demon cauldron, instantly opening a bloody hole. Crimson, fresh blood gushed forth like a spring. Fang Chen made a pulling gesture from afar, and the blood turned into a rainbow streak that flew over, splashing entirely onto the bronze vessel. The moment the inscriptions touched the blood, they emitted a mysterious luster, as if the ancient characters were coming alive. In the span of a breath, the bronze vessel was drenched in the blood of the held desolate beast. All the inscriptions trembled violently, on the verge of breaking free from their bronze restraint. Now only the chant remained. The Merciful Heart Sage had also noticed the commotion. He fixed his eyes on it, and once he recognized the object, his expression drastically changed. He shrieked in horror, "A sacrificial bronze vessel from the Hell Realm. How do you have such a thing?" Fang Chen replied coldly, "Not only do I have it, I can also activate it." Seeing that the inscriptions were already activated, Fang Chen immediately began to chant their contents in a clear voice, none other than the book of inviting the saint to descend. The entire text was barely more than 100 words, and it could be recited in an instant. The Merciful Heart Sage's face turned ashen with terror, and he shrieked, "Stop, you little beast, stop." He knew all too well that once such a bronze vessel was activated, it could summon a wisp of a Hell Realm Lord's avatar to descend and annihilate foes. A Realm Lord. A terrifying existence comparable to a Central Earth saint. The mere thought of a saint's avatar descending to destroy him made his scalp tingle with dread. He wanted to stop Fang Chen, but he was locked in a life and death struggle with the 9-colored tribulation lightning and could spare no hand. Otherwise, the 9-colored tribulation lightning would instantly engulf and annihilate him. Now it was a race to see who could be faster. If he suppressed the 9-colored tribulation lightning first, Fang Chen would die, otherwise he would die. Both were racing against time. 1 breath, 2 breaths, 3 breaths. The air seemed ignited by their mutual desperation, scorching hot and warping violently. Between heaven and earth, there was no sound save for Fang Chen's urgent chanting. This was clearly a life or death race of extreme speed. After 10 breaths, Fang Chen's chanting abruptly ceased. He had finished. Meanwhile, the compassionate sage had only compressed the 9-colored tribulation lightning to the size of a fist. His face showed terror as he hurriedly looked around, but the expected arrival of the Realm Lord's avatar did not occur. Fang Chen's heart also lurched in alarm. He remembered that when the avatar of the chaotic blood marquis had descended, it had come by forcefully tearing through the void. If the Hell Realm Lord's avatar were to descend, it should likewise tear through the void. Yet all around was deathly silence, without the slightest anomaly. Fang Chen's expression instantly turned extremely grim. Could it be that because he was not a being of the Hell Realm, the summoning had failed? At that moment, the compassionate sage successfully reverted the 9-colored tribulation lightning back to its 9-colored crystal state. His back was drenched with cold sweat, his eyes filled with lingering fear, and the glare he shot at Fang Chen was bursting with overwhelming killing intent. He bellowed, "You little beast, I nearly capsized in your gutter. You deserve to die 10,000 deaths." Before his words faded, the divine steel of merit behind him suddenly activated, and a terrifying force of merit pressed down on Fang Chen like the collapsing sky. This was a fatal blow that Fang Chen could not possibly withstand. Fang Chen's heart instantly sank to the bottom of an abyss. In the end, it was a failure after all. How unwilling he was. Suddenly, out of the corner of his eye, he glimpsed the distant 9, Dragon Demon Cauldron, and lightning flashed through his mind as he recalled that calamity, dispelling Black Lotus that had been lurking in the nearby void, intent on capturing him. He also remembered the terrifying scene when that Black Lotus had forcibly dragged the evil crow, Venerable, into the void and devoured him. A look of resolute determination flashed in his eyes. Even if he died, he would make sure the compassionate sage would not fare well. With all his strength, he launched a strand of spatial origin towards the 9, Dragon Demon Cauldron from afar. Only by doing so could he tear the void and lure the calamity, dispelling Black Lotus over. Alas, he would no longer be able to witness that scene. The overwhelming force of merit, like a whirl-dending tsunami, had completely engulfed him, and an indescribable, terrifying pressure nearly tore his body to shreds. However, just as the tearing agony surged, it receded like the tide. Then a woman's voice, magnetic and alluring like fine sand being rubbed, slowly sounded from behind him. "It's actually a human summoning me." Interesting. Fang Chen was startled and abruptly turned his head to look. There behind him, he saw a stunningly beautiful young woman of around 30, who had silently appeared without a trace. She wore a blood-red long dress that brushed the ground, a red floral crown on her head, and a bright red vermilion mark on her forehead. Her skin was like exquisite mutton, fat jade, faintly revealing fine meridian patterns. Her delicate features exuded boundless allure. One could not pinpoint exactly where her beauty lay, yet it was impossible to resist falling into it. For a split second, a dazed look appeared in Fang Chen's eyes, but then the rustling sound of the primordial void ancient tree rang out in his mind, and he sharply regained clarity. His heart screaming alarm. What kind of terrifying existence was this? Not even the remnant soul of the Asura Emperor, Ui, of the seductive Asura clan, had ever caused him to sink so deeply into beauty. The bewitching avatar of the Realm Lord sized him up with great interest and chuckled. "Little human, you're a bit special, managing to resist my allure. It seems you possess a great treasure." Only then did Fang Chen fully come to his senses. His ritual had succeeded. He had truly summoned an avatar of a Realm Lord from the Hell Realm to the Middle Continent. Without hesitation, he reported the name of his good brother, Junior Wang Chengxi, Ogreet Senior of the Hell Realm. When facing such an unknown horror, it was best to keep a card up his sleeve. The Realm Lord's avatar was still examining him with interest when she suddenly sensed something, lifted her head to glance at the firmament, and then said, "Time is pressing. Let's finish the main business first. What did you summon me for? Speak." Fang Chen glanced at the merit force that was casually blocked above the avatar's head, unable to descend no matter what, and his heart settled greatly. He raised his hand and pointed at the compassionate sage, saying in a deep voice, "Kill him." Hearing this, the compassionate sage's face drastically changed, and he hurriedly shouted, "Fellow Taoist of the Hell Realm, wait. You and I are both sages. Why be instigated by a junior into meaningless slaughter?